There are black street forces fighting with the local navy of Rogtown everywhere, and the scale of the melee has expanded to the entire town. There are even many small pirates who have obtained information and sneaked ashore to take advantage of the fire. All the local residents took care of the windows and locked the doors. Bucky had already memorized the map of Rogtown in his heart, and there was no delay or detour at this time. He went straight from the central square and arrived at the dock in less than half an hour without being blocked. On the beach on the south coast of the pirate ship. The situation on the south bank seems to be even more chaotic. The underworld forces, the navy with gun barrels, the lifeless little pirates, and some eager bounty hunters are in a mess. Even non-combatants like Kaya were passively protecting the Bakudop. She stood on the deck, layers of tiny brown bubbles appeared on her hands, like a shield blocking the position of the shells. The cannonball was bounced back by the elasticity of the bubble. Where's Bucky? The bounty hunter, who was dazed by the bounty offer, was cut down by a pirate wearing a black turban. Hey, I still remember you, bastard, taking my first mate. Before the pirate finished speaking, he was hit by several stray bullets and fell to the ground covered in blood. Bastard Navy, take your life. A few Blackstreet gangsters rushed towards the Navy soldiers, using scissors feet, twisting their necks, and street fighting methods one by one, buckling the joints of those Navy soldiers, and strangling them back heavily. Bucky used his 10 hands to push away a Navy that stood in front of him, then kicked a pirate away with one kick, and shouted to the Bikudup, get ready to anchor and sail. Mochi heard the familiar voice, looked at the man in the cloak and mask, and knew that Captain Bucky was back, and immediately put away the anchor. Jihei-zan. Minj. Kabaji took cover in front of the ship, and raised his hand with a flash of white light. When he retracted the knife, dozens of pirates and bounty hunters didn't know what happened. They suddenly felt the pain in their chest and fell to the ground. That guy is so strong. He is Kabaji, the fraud knife, that the Bucky pirates offered a reward of 300 million. Seeing that Kabaji knocked down dozens of people in an instant, everyone present couldn't help but stop their movements, and looked at each other in a daze. The reward of 300 million is equivalent to the captain of a small pirate group in the East China Sea, which should not be underestimated. The situation here is still chaotic, and there is another pirate ship with a swan on the bow sailing over there. The skull on the pirate sail flag draws a red heart, and you can hear the fawning on the pirate ship from a distance. Shouted, Ms. Alrita, the most beautiful woman on this sea, in front of you is Bucky the Clown's pirate ship. Ha ha ha. Very good, I like strong men. 19.5 million Bailey's Bucky is qualified to be my man, let's grab him. At this time, Yairita hadn't eaten the slippery fruit yet, her face was full of freckles, and her figure was very fat. When she smiled, her whole face became even more terrifying. She carried the Vajra rod on her shoulder with one hand and held it in the other standing on the railing of the boat. He watched the melee on the south bank with flickering eyes. Bucky here used several shaves to avoid the miscellaneous figures in a row, and by the way, he cleaned up the guy who was in the way with his feet and finger guns, cleared a path, and then jumped and landed on the deck. On the shore, Kabaji was entangled. Get ready to go. Get on the boat quickly, Kabaji. The sails of the Bakudop were raised, and with the sea wind driving towards the sea bit by bit, Kabaji drove back a bounty hunter on the shore, followed the rope, and jumped to the Bakudop deck. There were also a few stubborn bounty hunters who were attached to the hull of the Bakudop like geckos, holding their weapons in one hand and climbing up with their bodies in the other. For static. Mikkel was not idle either, with one hand hanging on the railing, he kicked away the bounty hunter who was attached to the ship with static electricity, and the latter fell into the sea with scorched black. The water splashed and splashed. Bucky the Clown. The rough voice came from the other side of the sea, and Bucky couldn't help but turned around and looked at the figure standing on the approaching pirate ship. He was stunned, rubbed the bridge of his nose helplessly, and sighed. He took a deep breath. Could this be a fateful encounter? In the original book, after Alrita ate the slippery fruit, she accidentally saw Bucky being hunted down by a sea beast, and rescued Bucky. After that, the two knew that the common goal was Luffy, so they cooperated and rescued the Bucky pirates from the Kamat tribe. Bucky originally thought that he had already arrived at Luojtown, the gateway to the East China Sea, and it was impossible to meet Alrita again. Unexpectedly, at the last moment, he still met, and he made it clear that the other party was coming for him. Shuma stared at Alrita with wide eyes, and shouted in surprise. Hey, Bucky, do you know this pumpkin ingredient? The Alrita pirates were only about 100 meters away from the Bakudop. Although the voice of Shuma's words was past, the other party still heard it. Pumpkin ingredients. Pumpkin ingredients. Pumpkin ingredients. The jaws of the pirates of the Alrita pirates were about to drop to the ground. The last pirate finished reading this sentence in a daze, and the next pirate then repeated it in a daze. Pumpkin. Ingredients. Alrita muttered in a low voice, her eyes buried in the shadows, and then suddenly roared, "Damn pirate Bucky, come here, bring the gun mounts here." The pirates next to him gulped, not daring to be negligent, and hurriedly carried the gun mount over and put the shells in. Alrita pushed away the pirate by the side of the fort, took the torch in his hand, and looked very ferocious. "I want to bombard you for saying such damn things to the most beautiful lady in this sea. Sink that hateful pirate ship." After speaking, he lit the fuse. The fuse, ZZ, burned out, and the black shells were fired at the Bakudop. Alrita sneered, squinting at the pink-haired boy beside her. "Kabi, who is the most beautiful woman in this sea?" She enjoys the words from the mouth of this handyman who was captured more than a year ago than the words from the mouths of those dirty and vicious-looking pirates on the ship. The pink-haired boy squeezed out a smile. "Of course, Miss Alrita." Before the words fell, the shell that was fired flew back and exploded on the ship. Seeing the black smoke rising from the Miss Rab Daku on the other side, Bucky showed a sly smile, patted Mochi on the shoulder with satisfaction, and then said to Shuma, "Can you get that ship? Has the ship's mainmast come down?" "Oh. No problem." Shuma responded, turned around, and the raptor boomerang flew out in the air, like a swallow flying in the air, circled around the opponent's ship, and flew backhand. Finally, the opponent's thick main mast was crumbling, and fell to the deck at the bow, and the ship began to shake unsteadily from side to side. "Since you are here, make some contributions and become the target of the Navy for us." Looking at the Daku, which was moving slower than a snail after the mast was broken, Bucky turned his head, start to the great route. The rough sea was surging with waves, and the Bikudup headed straight in the direction of the upside-down mountain. "I'm leaving the East China Sea soon." Bucky looked at the boundless sea behind him, and stayed here for 10 years, not because of his deep feelings, but because he left a familiar place and went to another strange place, so there would be some sadness. Goodbye, Xiluobu village. Kia didn't bother to read medical books, thinking that she might not come back for a long time in the future. She looked at the ocean to the east with some sadness, thinking about Meili and Usopp. Mikkel pouted, gnawed on the braised sauri on the plate, and murmured tearfully, "I won't see Nami and Nuo Kagao in the future. I miss them so much. Sauri is delicious, woo." There will be tears of sadness on the face for a while, and a blush of happiness for a while, and the two cat ears are trembling. In stark contrast to the three of them was Shu Ma, who was dancing and restless. "Wow wow wow. That's great, I'm finally going to travel." As he spoke, he wanted to touch Mikkel's head restlessly, but was slapped off by the latter, with an angry expression on his face. "Don't touch me, the president is not tall, Shutaro." Kittens don't like to be called by other people's names. Most of the time, they will carefully give each other a nickname based on their appearance. For example, Kaya is called Lemon, Mochi is called Sheep Ba, Kabaji is called Scarf, Ba in K's case, sometimes he is called Captain Red Nose, sometimes he is called Uncle Redball, and sometimes he is simply called Hi. Shuma didn't care about Mikkel's actions, and ran to Kabaji and Mochi again in a blink of an eye, with an exaggerated expression on his face. "Oh, that's amazing. Don't look." Kabaji pushed Shuma away, covered the playing cards in his hand, and showed a rather despicable smile at Mochi. "Mochi, I only have 2 cards left, and I will win soon. Ha ha. Damn it." Mochi held a bad deck of cards in his hand, hesitated, didn't know which card to play, sneaked glances at Kabaji from time to time, and finally made up his mind. "Yes, Jack." "Are you going to play jacks?" Kabaji deliberately refused to play, but looked at Mochi with interest. Just as Mochi was about to lose control, Bucky's voice came over, "Come here, all of you." So Mochi cut at Kabaji, and threw all the cards in his hand into the pile of cards on the deck. "No more, no more, Captain Bucky told us to go over." "You white-haired monster, this is trying to blame you." Kabaji's face was full of black lines. Although there is no direct interest in playing cards, the contest between the two did not happen overnight. They were about to win, but Mochi escaped like this, and suddenly felt a little angry. "Don't you dare to disobey Captain Bucky's order." Mochi patted the opponent's shoulder, nodded and said, Okay, at worst, we will start another game later, this time I will let you." HMPH. Kabaji snorted coldly, seeing that the other party was using Captain Bucky to suppress him. He didn't say much, and walked side by side with Mochi. Mikkel was also half pushed and brought over by Kaya, and they formed a circle. Mikkel, Kia, Shuma, Kabaji, Mochi. Bucky glanced around in order. "Since we are about to embark on the great route, let's have a special celebration ceremony." Shuma asked curiously, "What ceremony?" "Just tell your dreams here." Bucky's mouth showed a sly smile at any time, although it is very cliched, but as the driving force for us to move forward, we must make a decision early. Do you have any comments?" Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Well, I started, and then followed Mikkel's direction. Buggy said slowly, follow the trajectory of freedom and reach the peak of this world, One Piece. After he finished speaking, everyone's eyes fell on Mikkel, who was a little embarrassed. The most outstanding navigator. Mikkel glanced left and right, and said with some shame, don't laugh, no one is allowed to laugh. Look, relieved in my heart. Kya said with a rather serious face, I want to see this world and become an excellent doctor. Wow. Everyone has a dream. Shuma rubbed his fingers under his nose, and suddenly said excitedly, then I will be as good as the bearded uncle, and find the blue sea that exists in this world. Kabaji, it's your turn. Buggy reminded, although he knew that the dream of a swordsman must be to become the world's #1 swordsman. Yunyan. Me. Cough. Kabaji coughed twice restrainedly, and after adjusting his mood, he said, my dream is to become a hero that everyone is looking forward to. Okay. Buggy was stunned, this script is wrong. Ha ha ha. Mochi laughed loudly, the one-eyed dragon actually has such a strange dream. Less wordy, white-haired monster, it's your turn. Kabaji snorted and turned his head away, as if he felt a little ashamed for speaking his heart. This is different from the shyness of a kitten and belongs to a man's shyness. Moki's body trembled slightly, as if he was brewing emotions. Everyone's eyes fell on him, and they were also curious in their hearts. What dreams would the animal trainer have? Tame all the animals in this world, or become friends with all the animals in the world? Mochi suddenly yelled out, I have no dreams, haha. Buggy had a dark face, kicked him away, and the corners of his eyes twitched. Salted fish without dreams, go to the corner of the wall and reflect. I'm sorry, Captain Buggy. Mochi had no choice but to bow to the captain's power, and hurried back to apologize. Buggy spared him for the time being, then picked up the wine bottle on the barrel, poured a glass for everyone, held it high and said, come on, toast to the dream. What is the most important thing about a ship that is constantly sailing at sea? It is the cohesion among partners. Everyone picked up their glasses one after another, but Kia said timidly, I can't drink, or it will be very indecent. Before Buggy could speak, Mikkel had already picked up the other party's wine glass, persuading him, Sister Lemon, it's okay, the wine is delicious. She wasn't very good at drinking at first, but after staying with Nami and Nuo Kagao for a long time, she gradually no longer rejected them, and instead liked this drink a little bit. Oh. I see. Kya didn't want to ruin the newly established atmosphere, so she took the wine glass. The 6 people's wine glasses collided together, and the crystal clear wine splashed onto the deck, reflecting each other under the sun, and then, everyone drank the wine in one gulp. Buggy wiped the wine stains from the corner of his mouth. This kind of bond with dreams as the carrier should last for a long time. At least in the future voyage, this group of people will become reliable partners who can deliver behind. Sister Lemon. What's the matter with you? Mikkel supported Kia, who was shaking, and the latter touched her forehead. Her face was reddened by the alcohol. Very bad. Buggy looked at Kia's face, and said to Mikkel, she must be drunk, help her back to her room to rest. Drunk? Kya's voice suddenly became louder. She stood up straight, pushed Mikkel away, rolled up her sleeves, and laughed boldly. Haha, you bastards are so naive, thinking that this can drinking be enough to stump me. Come, drink another 300 cups with me. Everyone was stunned. Is this still the quiet, harmless, polite and modest ship doctor? Why does it feel wrong? Hey, Buggy. Kia stepped on the wooden barrel, put her right hand on her raised knee, half closed her eyes. Why, don't you even drink wine with me? A drop of cold sweat hung on Buggy's forehead. He touched Kia's forehead with the back of his hand, and then touched his own forehead. I don't have a fever. You look down on me, you red-nosed bastard. Kia patted Buggy's hand away, picked up the remaining half bottle of wine in the bottle, drank it directly from his mouth, and drank it up on his back in the blink of an eye, then slapped the empty wine bottle on the wooden barrel heavily, disdainfully looking at each other. Fuck. Buggy was stunned for a moment. This drink is okay, but no wonder she said that indecent things will happen, but the contrast is too big. Okay. Buggy couldn't laugh or cry. Shuma, go get some wine and make some appetizers. It's rare to see Kya Song's funny side. Let's celebrate today. Mikkel put the painter's hat on his head, set up the easel, took out the paintbrush, frowned and thought hard, and suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and the paintbrush in his hand began to move continuously on the drawing paper. After a while, a bright oil painting appeared on the paper. Kia hugged Buggy's neck in a shapeless manner, with an empty wine bottle in the other hand, and sang a popular song in Zailuobu village in a rough voice. Shuma next to him set up a dining table on the deck, holding out delicious food with one hand high and the other low. At the dining table, Kabaji and Mochi looked at each other inexplicably and quarreled again. It's such a weird atmosphere. Mikkel frowned and looked at the painting he made, and muttered, but why does it feel so harmonious? The naval headquarters directly under the world government, East China Sea Intelligence Office. In the center of the hall stood Lieutenant Commander Branu of the Navy headquarters, and on both sides were dozens of naval officers sitting neatly. It's all here. Branu glanced around, and then pasted a reward list on the whiteboard. A few days ago, I received a message from Brigadier General Brin Brin of the 77th Division of the East China Sea and Colonel Mouse of the 20th Division. Emergency communication. The Aaron pirate Sawtooth Aaron, who was offering a reward of 20 million in the East China Sea, was killed. Just the evening before yesterday, Colonel Smoker of the Navy headquarters guarding Rogue Town also ordered someone to send a document about the clown Buggy, claiming that the East China Sea is the worst. What do you guys think? Buggy the clown. His bounty rose to 19.5 million Baileys a while ago, but he didn't expect to start making trouble again in a few days. The average reward is 3 million Baileys in the East China Sea. The clown Buggy has not only been active for nearly 10 years, but the amount of rewards has been increasing. Now he dares to provoke the majesty of the Navy. It is an unforgivable crime. It seems that they are no longer guys that the branch can deal with. The officers on both sides were discussing. Brano patted the table and took out a brand new reward list. That's right, at present, Buggy the clown is an absolutely terrifying existence. I don't think we should take it lightly, so, this is what I give the reward amount. On a sailing warship in the East China Sea. The girl with dark blue hair lowered her head and said guiltily, I'm really sorry, Chief Smoker, I shouldn't have acted alone and caused you a lot of trouble. The messenger standing next to Smoke quickly reminded in a low voice, Sergeant Dashichi, Colonel Smoke is here. Oh. Dasiki hurriedly turned around, only then did she vaguely realize that Smoker was sitting on the chair with her back to her. HMPH, this clown Buggy is really cunning, he put me in the same place. Smoker smoked a cigar. Dashichi, what's the matter with that cook? It was Sanji who saved my life. He took the boat to go to Rogue Town to buy ingredients. He is not a member of the pirates. You can't get me wrong. Dasiki waved his hand quickly and said. Miss Dashichi, please accept my love. The nympho-like voice from outside came again. Pod pod pod, the voice of the phone bug rang, and Smoker waved his hand. Okay, go out, it's best that you can take care of that cook. If you let him quarrel every day, I will throw him into the sea. Yes. Dasiki left the room weakly. Smoker picked up the phone bug. Hi, this is Captain Smoker of the Navy headquarters. I'm Tina of the Navy headquarters. There was a crisp laughter from the other end of the phone bug. Hee hee. Tina saw the latest newspaper, Flower Hunter, Smoker. Don't mention that. Remembering that the matter of wearing a pink bathrobe in Rogue Town was not only exposed, but also published in the newspapers, Smoker was so angry that he wanted to kill people. Not only that, even his White Hunter, the title, was roughly tampered with as Flower Hunter, and it spread in just a few days, which had a great impact. Some people in the Navy headquarters couldn't understand his style of behavior, and they even claimed that he was damaging the image of the Navy and took the opportunity to suppress it. Tina expressed her shock. When did you have such a unique habit, and even Dashichi under your command has the title of Male Knife? Why don't you explain? Colonel Smoker. Tina lengthened the ending sound, which meant that there was a sense of teasing in it, and the relationship between the two was very good. If others said that, Smoker would have turned the tables. The corner of Smoker's mouth twitched, and he said through gritted teeth, it's the clown Buggy's good deed. This cunning pirate plotted against me. Buggy the clown. Tina on the phone bug slowed down, and said with some surprise, is that the East China Sea, who has recently gained fame. This pirate is very dangerous. He is probably about to reach the Great Route. If you find his whereabouts, you'd better arrest him on the spot. Also, he took away my weapon, which is inlaid with sea stones. If you encounter it, you be careful. Is that so? Tina knows. Tina's voice became serious, and her serious expression was perfectly imitated by the phone bug. I will ask the higher-ups to help capture the clown Buggy. Blackstreet in Rogue Town. Boss, important information. A boy wearing a turban hurried over with a newspaper in his hand. Don't panic. Do things more calmly. Bartolomeo reprimanded calmly. Yes, it's news from Buggy the clown, said the hooded boy out of breath. What, are they some bastards from Buggy Pirates? As soon as the turban boy finished speaking, Bartolomeo jumped up violently, grabbed the newspaper, read it, and then pressed it on the table. How long will it take for our ship to be built? Boss, those shipwrights said it will take another month. It's still a month away. Bartolomeo bared his fangs. Where is the Navy? Did you return the photo of Dashichi to them? Yes, In order to clarify our innocence, it has been sent to the naval base. The Navy said that since no one was killed, as long as we are willing to apologize publicly, compensate for the damage and clean the streets, we are willing to negotiate with us and let the past go. The turban boy slowed down his tone, and looked at Bartolomeo in embarrassment. Although their requirements are very harsh, it's better not to fight against them. The flower hunter smoker is too difficult to deal with, and there are still a few brother hundreds locked in prison. Then make a public apology. Bartolomeo picked his nostrils indifferently. How could I abandon my lovely little brothers? Woo. Not only the turban boy, but all the gangsters present covered their faces and cried bitterly, as expected of our beloved boss Barto. It's so touching. In the center of an island on the Great Route, a red-haired man in baggy cropped trousers and a black cloak sat on a stone slab, looked at the newspapers laid flat on the ground, and blinked fiercely. Suddenly he laughed heartily and said, "Hey, it's him, that kid Bucky." "What's the matter, Shanks?" Another tall man came over with a cigarette in his mouth, a little puzzled why the captain was so excited all of a sudden. Shanks pointed to a photo in the newspaper, and said with some emotion, "Beckman. This is the guy who was an intern with me on Captain Rogers' ship. It's the first time I've heard of him in so many years. The news. It really makes people miss that period of slapstick. The crew on the ship of One Piece Roger." Beckman picked up the newspaper and carefully browsed the information on it, not daring to let go of the slightest bit. There was a big commotion in Roger Town. Are you just about to enter the Great Route? Don't underestimate the enemy. This kid is not an opponent that can be underestimated, haha. Shanks laughed loudly. To celebrate this kid entering the Great Route, little ones, let's hold a banquet today. Oh. It's a banquet. The surrounding pirates raised their hands and responded excitedly. Bucky the Clown. Beckman secretly kept this name in his heart. He was a crew member with Shanks on the One Piece ship, and a man who can be valued so much by Shanks. This man should not be simple. The Bakudop continued to move towards the reversing mountain, and the red mountain in front of him could be vaguely seen in the surrounding clouds and mist. Bucky held the newspaper in his hand with relish, and the impressive headline on the newspaper was on the first page, "Shocked, Roger Township Captain Smoker did such an outrageous thing." Below is a photo of Smoker's ferocious face, running wildly on the road in a pink bathrobe. This is probably the clearest one out of dozens of photos taken. Even the leg hair on his legs can count clearly. Flower hunter smoker. Bucky couldn't help laughing as he thought of it, as if he had done something extraordinary. Then he handed the newspaper to Moki, who was on the side, and took out a reward list mixed in the newspaper, which was his own. Bucky the Clown, a reward of 48 million Baileys is offered, regardless of life or death. This bounty is a bit high. In the original book, Luffy only gave out a reward of 30 million for defeating Bucky pirates, Creek pirates, and Aaron pirates, and now he has directly offered himself a reward of 19.5 million. 48 million, it is conceivable that the Navy headquarters attaches great importance to itself. Just as Bucky was thinking, Moki and Kabaji over there had already had a fight. One-eyed dragon, this male knife. Dasiki was dressed up by you. Others can't recognize it, but for me, Uncle Moki, he can recognize it at a glance. Haha, it's so funny when you wear a skirt. I'm obviously very cautious, how could I be photographed? As he spoke, Kabaji realized that he had said something he shouldn't have said, and quickly denied, I don't know that kind of guy. Mochi took the newspaper and walked towards Shuma. Shuma, come and see, is this Kabaji? Kabaji stopped the opponent angrily. White-haired monster, wait for me. Okay, stop arguing. Bucky stretched out his hand to lift the two of them apart. We're ready to enter Reverse Mountain. Understood. The two responded at the same time. The sea current has become stronger. Mickle Cat's ears trembled, and he looked at the sea ahead seriously. Scarf, I'm ready to furl the sails. If you move forward too fast, it will be difficult to adjust the direction of travel. It's really convincing, Kabaji said, and the movements of his hands were not idle, and he quickly retracted the sails. Ba sheep, turn the rudder to the left at 11 o'clock. Mickle shouted decisively, as if he was different from his usual lazy look. Don't use that strange nickname. Mochi followed the other party's instructions and turned the rudder reluctantly. Hey, that red mountain is so big. Shu Ma raised his head and looked into the distance, with an incredulous look on his face. Finally, we are about to reach the starting point of the great voyage. Are you upside down the mountain? Bucky murmured as he looked at the red soil continent that was getting closer and closer. Mickle gave a vaccination to most people who have never seen the Red Mountain. Get ready to climb the mountain. The Red Mountain towers high above the clouds, majestic and exudes a vicissitudes of life. Compared with it, the Bakudop is like a tiny ant. The strong current suction pushes the Bikudup to the ocean current of the Red Mountain Central Canal, and the rough sea shakes the pirate ship from side to side, and the gap in the middle of the cliff in front of him becomes clearer and clearer. Okay. Climb up in this direction at one go, Mikkel shouted excitedly. Under her excellent continuous command and adjustment of the direction of travel, the Bakudop followed the current and successfully sailed into the canal in the middle. At this time, Buggy was attracted by the gates on both sides of the canal in the middle of the cliff, and a little doubt appeared in his heart. Who would have built the gates at the entrance of the Great Airway? Could it be who carved the patterns of dragon head and fish body on it? Does the dragon head and fish body mean that after entering the Great Route, it is like a fish jumping over a dragon's gate? There are still other meanings. Could there be something hidden behind the gate that can be built in such a violent ocean current? Just in a trance, the Bakudop has safely passed the gate along the current and continued to drive to the top of the mountain. The gate gradually became smaller and disappeared from sight. Bucky shook his head and didn't think about it anymore, but the sky in front of him was getting closer and closer, following the ocean current. The speed of the boat was getting faster and faster, and the sea breeze swept everyone back. Gradually, after passing through layers of thick clouds, when I looked back, my eyes were full of clouds, and I could no longer see the scenery below. Don't be careless, the current is going to rush down, Mikkel reminded loudly. Following her words, the speed of the sea current slowed down a lot, and in the next instant, it accelerated and rushed downward, and began to descend the mountain. Haha, it's so interesting. The road of saliva in the middle of the persimmon cake continent. Shuma hugged the ship's mast, without any nervous expression, and shouted happily. Cat, have you been here? Bucky asked. No, but I stole a route map of Upside Down Mountain from the warship. Mikkel replied, however, I put it in Kokoyasi village. That's right. Bucky nodded. Upside Down Mountain is not a single track that can only be entered and cannot be entered. For example, in the original book, Click was chased by Hawkeye and fled back to the East China Sea from the Great Route, so the warship will be prepared. The route map of Upside Down Mountain is not uncommon. Following the downward current, basically only the gauze-like clouds and mist can be seen in the field of vision. When I saw the scene in front of me again, it was already more than 10 minutes later, and the waves on the sea finally calmed down a lot. No. Bucky suddenly remembered something. He remembered that in the original book, when Luffy passed through the Upside Down Mountain, there was a whale rab who looked like a small mountain. If it hits now, it would be terrible. He shouted loudly, Shu Ma, see what is blocking the front. Shu Ma took a look around. Report, there is nothing ahead. No, Huma's eyesight is absolutely trustworthy, so Rab was not in the way. Bucky heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the timing was just right. The Bakudop sailed down the reversing mountain smoothly, and after a certain distance in the downward inertia, the speed of the ship began to become very slow. Get ready to steer for shore, Mochi. Now that we are here, it is better to pay a visit to the ship doctor who has sailed together for 3 years. Bucky looked towards the lighthouse on Gemini Cape, and out of the corner of his eye, he could still see a simple boat docked beside the Red Earth continent. Are there other visitors? Mochi slowly turned the rudder and gradually docked the boat on the shore. Let's anchor first, we're going to stay here for a while. After finishing speaking, Bucky climbed onto the Red Earth continent and shouted in the direction of the lighthouse, as Uncle Kuloka's there. A figure walked out from the corner of the lighthouse, holding a newspaper in his hand. Who is calling me? He pushed his glasses, stared at Bucky for a while, and finally showed some surprise on his face. Aren't you Bucky? It seems that after all these years, your memory is still so good. Bucky smiled at the other party. I thought you would forget me. I almost forgot about you, but you made too much noise. Kulokas put the newspaper on the leisure table. Bucky the Clown made a big noise in the town of beginning and end. Another news from Rogue Town. Bucky spread his hands and was speechless, and then shouted to the boat, you all come up, Kitty, and wake up Kia. Kaya drank a lot of wine, and then lay down in the room drunkenly. She didn't wake up all this time, and she probably didn't even know that she had passed the reversing mountain. By the way, he is still inside. Krokas clapped his hands, suddenly remembered something, and walked towards the lighthouse. Bucky, wait a minute, there is an acquaintance inside. Acquaintance? Bucky looked in the direction of the lighthouse suspiciously until the two walked out side by side. One is Kurokas, the ship doctor of One Piece, and the other is wearing a loose cloak, with a Wano hat covering his head, covering the bundled pale hair, and wearing a pair of masks that can barely block his eyes. The round sunglasses, the skin looks a little loose, very old. You. Bucky was stunned. This person's face was very familiar, and he was startled suddenly. Mr. Jabba. Not bad, it seems you can still recognize me, Bucky. Jabba laughed loudly. It's been a long time. So it's you. How could I not recognize it? Bucky smiled sarcastically, but there were surprises in his eyes. One Piece King Roger's right-hand man. One is the right-hand Sir Baz Raleigh, and the other is the left-hand spark Jabba. The strength of the two is comparable, and they are both legends. But, Buggy asked, why did Mr. Jabba appear here? Jabba smiled. I'm planning to go from Upside Down Mountain to the South China Sea. So. Buggy rolled his eyes. It's hard to meet each other. Mr. Jabba shouldn't be in a hurry to leave. After finishing speaking, he said to Shu Ma, who was still on the deck, Shu Ma, bring some cans of good wine from the East China Sea. These are your partners, right? They're all good. Jabba looked at Kabaji and Mochi climbing up beside Buggy, and suddenly changed the topic. But you kid wants to buy me a drink, don't you? Come up with an idea. You and Shanks have had a lot of trouble on Roger's ship. Okay. Let's sit down and talk. What are you doing standing up? Kulokas interjected. Buggy kindly pulled Jabba to sit on the chair, and said sincerely, I know I can't hide it from Mr. Jabba, but I still have some things to ask you. What do you need help from me, a bad old man? Mr. Jabba is not an old man. Buggy took the wine handed over by Huma, enthusiastically poured a glass for Jabba, and bluntly revealed his purpose, I want to learn domineering. Jabba picked up the wine-scented glass and was about to drink it, but when he heard what Buggy said, he put the wine glass back on the wooden table. When I was on the boat, I taught you to be domineering, didn't you still say? As long as you have the ability of a devil fruit, that's enough. How come you figured it out now? That's not what I said at all. Buggy thought in his stomach, with an embarrassed smile on his face, there is no way. Whoever called Buggy in the original book has an arrogant personality. He is obviously a crew member of One Piece, and the environment is unique, but if you haven't even learned the basics of domineering, you're simply reckless. Looking at Buggy's deflated face, Jabba said solemnly, okay, I'm not joking with you anymore. Domineering is the power that every creature in this world is born with, but most people can't realize this potential. And this can't be learned overnight. If you really want to learn domineering, I will teach you after I come back from South China Sea. Buggy asked, how long will it take for Mr. Jabba to come back from the South China Sea? A few months at the fastest, a year at the slowest. Jabba then slowly picked up the wine glass, drank it clean, and licked his mouth. The wine in Donghai is still very tasty. Buggy looked at the people behind him and shook his head, I'm afraid we won't be able to wait for such a long time. Jabba said, then there's no other way. It's not that I hide my secrets and don't want to teach you. Buggy asked, well, by the way, how does Mr. Jabba plan to pass the Upside Down Mountain? The currents of the Upside Down Mountains have always followed the east, west, north, south and four seas to the canal in the middle of the Great Route. Although Buggy must have a way to get in and out, he is still curious about how to get in and out. I've lived here for so many years, so let me explain. Kulokas interrupted, explaining slowly. The surface of the inverted mountain is a winter island, so the current will rush into the bottom of the sea from the sea along the four seas, and bring the current to the inverted mountain. However, this winter island phenomenon presents a cycle. After each cycle, the red soil, the heat from the interior of the continent will expand, and the ocean current will no longer flow in the direction of the Upside Down Mountain, but will return to the original downward direction. Jabba nodded. That's right, just like what Kurokas said, after a cycle, the ocean current that reverses the mountain will return. So, how many days from the next cycle? Buggy asked. Kulokas said, 2 days, it should be 2 days later, the current will return to the direction of the four seas in about 1 day. 2 days. Buggy rolled his eyes cunningly, and then begged Jabba. Then Mr. Jabba can teach us something about domineering in these 2 days? He had to hug his thigh when it was time to hug. Buggy didn't want to miss such a good opportunity. Haha. Don't tell me you are so self-motivated. You are worthy of being a pirate who is about to embark on a great voyage. How about this? I will try my best to teach you some things in the past 2 days. If there is anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. As expected of Mr. Jabba, Buggy was overjoyed, and then said to Moki, Kabaji and the others behind him, you all come here too. This gentleman is a living legend, and the experience he has accumulated can benefit you a lot for the rest of your life. Shallow. Okay. Don't flatter me. I will simply teach you some basic knowledge about domineering, so that you can contact and learn in the future. Jabba supported the hat on his head and sat upright. Domineering is the potential of all creatures in this world, not just human beings. It is equivalent to bravery, momentum, sound, and deterrence to a certain extent. In other words, is a kind of faith. The power of belief that comes from the heart. As he spoke, he pointed to Kabaji, swordsman, attack me with all your strength. Kabaji looked at Buggy hesitantly, and the latter nodded and said, do as Mr. Jabba said. If you can hurt him, I'll wring his head off and kick it for you. Then I'll be rude. Kabaji put his right hand on the scabbard, and suddenly drew out the knife and stabbed. Right. Jabba had already said before Kabaji raised his knife, and then he tilted his head casually, and poked his right hand towards Kabaji like a spirit snake. Sakura Fubuki in Kabaji's hand took it, and then stretched out his finger and flicked the knife body lightly. The long knife made a crisp buzzing sound. There are 3 kinds of domineering, and this is the color of knowledge. Jabba threw Sakura Fukishui back to Kabaji, and commented, "Your movement just now was not bad, but it was not decisive enough. You should have just stepped into your own way of swordsmanship. Keep moving forward, and maybe in the future you will be able to grow into a swordsman who is not weaker than others." "Yes, I've been taught." Kabaji retracted his knife, thoughtful. "That kid, hit me with all your strength, I won't hide this time." Jabba pointed at Mochi and said. "Me?" Mochi pointed to himself, swung his right fist into a windmill, stored power, and slammed at Jabba suddenly with the sound of piercing the air. "Then you have to be careful." Jabba just stretched out one hand, calmly blocking Mochi's punching fist. Boom. As if the sound of metal hitting came, Mochi's face changed drastically, and he immediately withdrew his fist, covered it with the other hand and ran around, baring his teeth and crying out for pain. This is the second type of domineering, armed color. Jabba nodded to Mochi. "It seems that you should also be a devil fruit capable person. Devil fruits have never been divided into strengths and weaknesses. The key is how you use them. There are not a few strong people with devil fruit abilities in this sea, and I hope you can become one of them." Mochi blew air on his red and swollen right hand, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, the old man is too powerful, but the strike is too ruthless." Jabba said solemnly. "Okay, the next thing is the last kind of domineering, domineering. Domineering looked domineering. Not only Bucky, but everyone else also looked at Jabba intently. The first 2 kinds of arrogance he unleashed were indeed extraordinary, so the domineering arrogance as the finale should be even more terrifying. "Are you ready?" Jabba glanced at everyone and said seriously. Everyone answered, even Bucky was a little nervous. So, Jabba's eyes widened, and when everyone had released his arrogance, he suddenly scratched his head and smiled shyly. "Actually, I won't be domineering anymore, haha." Everyone almost fell to the ground. Bucky's face was full of black lines. "Mr. Jabba, you can still joke." On Roger's boat, I've never seen Jabba use the Overlord color before, also. If 3 people on a ship and later Shanks are all Overlord color domineering owners, that would be too scary. Ahem, isn't this to ease the atmosphere? Jabba coughed twice indifferently, and continued. "Let me explain to you the 3-color domineering. First of all, the knowledge color. The knowledge color domineering can replace the 5 senses. To watch and predict the opponent's actions, so as to achieve the effect of predicting the future. Then is the armed color. The armed color domineering, you can imagine it as an invisible armor, although you can't see it, but in fact this armor is real, wrapped around the body, or attached to the weapon. It will cause terrible power. This is also the only means of confrontation besides the weakness of the natural fruit holders themselves. Domineering can also be divided into strengths and weaknesses. It has to do with your energy, which is what I said before. Of course, everyone's domineering practice is fast or slow. This is also related to talent. It cannot be said that a person who has cultivated domineering for 5 years it must not be an opponent who has cultivated domineering for 10 years. Bucky was thoughtful, and asked, "Where's Bawang Seo?" Jabba replied. "Overlord color is a kind of deterrent power, and the heroes who deter the world basically have this kind of power. But this kind of ability can only be controlled. It cannot be strengthened by cultivation, but can be strengthened by the growth of the user himself." After finishing speaking, he laughed again. "Bucky, instead of wanting to practice all of them, it is better to specialize in one of them. Excellent armed domineering is not necessarily worse than domineering. It just depends on the means and methods you use." Bucky suddenly had an idea. Then I should cultivate my overlord luck. Quickly threw the boring thoughts out of his mind, and asked again, "Mr. Jabba, will domineering consume a lot of energy?" Domineering will indeed be consumed, but as I said, what is consumed is energy, which is a kind of energy in the body. This energy is stored in the treasure house of human beings. If one day masters the method to open the treasure house, you will be able to for your use. Afterwards, Baki asked Jabba about the way of cultivating domineering and the other party's views on devil fruits, and also asked him about the difference between paper painting and knowledge color, iron block, and armed color in the 6 naval styles. Jabba didn't hide his secrets, and explained. Jiwi judges the direction of the opponent's attack from the outside by sensing the airflow caused by the opponent's body movements, while knowledge color judges the opponent's movements through the sound and frequency of the opponent's body. The iron block is to spread the damage of a certain part of the body to all parts of the body, while the armed color is to put a layer of armor on the body. When receiving damage, the armor can weaken the damage to the body. Bucky thought to himself. If you say this, the Navy's 6 styles and domineering will be judged. As expected, domineering is the most powerful existence. But Jabba saw Bucky's thoughts, and continued, you don't need to overwhelm yourself with too many skills. If you practice hard and integrate the 6 naval styles into your fighting instincts, instead of sticking to the forms of paper drawing and iron block, coupled with domineering, that naval legend is a good example. Every punch and every kick of his has integrated the essence of the 6 naval styles. What Jabba was talking about should be Garp. Indeed, this man combined the 6 styles of the Navy and domineering. When fighting against Roger, he himself experienced this overwhelming power. And Mochi and Kabaji were also pointed out 1 or 2 because of Baki, and Shuma made all kinds of meals under his orders. Jabba ate it up and said it was delicious, claiming that he hadn't eaten such delicious food for a long time up. Kei-Ya was very happy to meet the author of Kuroka's medical knowledge, and kept asking him about various medical intractable diseases. Kaluokas was also willing to share his medical skills and insights with Kia. He was the most highly rated doctor back then, and even now, few people surpass him. As for Mikkel, she has been storing the record pointer, which she carried with her when she went to sea, and she did not make her own claim, but asked Bucky for advice. Uncle Red Nose, you are the captain, so let you come choose one of the 7 routes. Bucky took the route map and looked at it carefully, and finally decided to set the route map on the far right. It was not premeditated, the 7 routes were no different to him, but he had one sentence in mind when he chose, no one can come out right. In the end, just choose the one on the far right. Finally, 2 days later in the early morning, the ocean currents began to flow backwards. Jabba tidied up, got into the boat, and looked at the crowd. I really can't bear it, Bucky, I'm leaving. Kulokas, wait until I come back. When you come back, you 1T return if you re not drunk. Kulokas has been guarding the lighthouse in Cape Twins alone all year round. After some excitement, he is an old acquaintance again. When he parted, he couldn't help feeling a little sentimental, but he didn't show it on his face, and waved his hands expressionlessly. Don't worry, I'll always be here. Haha. Jabba laughed heartily twice, and the boat sailed up the current that reversed the mountain, and gradually turned into a black spot, disappearing from sight. Bucky watched him leave with a smile, and really wanted to lure him into the boat and teach himself how to cultivate domineering all the way, but it was still very difficult to cultivate domineering in just 2 days. Kulokas looked at Bucky and his group. Since Jabba is gone, you don't have the heart to stay. The record pointer was stored yesterday. Bucky nodded and said, we should really go too. Kulokas adjusted his glasses and smiled. Height anchor, set sail. Under Bucky's instructions, the Bikudup moved forward again, drifting away, and Kaya, who had been an apprentice for 2 days, waved goodbye to the doctor. Kulokas just quietly watched the Bikudup turning into a small dot, moved his ears, heard a powerful humming sound from the bottom of the sea, and shook his head. It's time to give Rab a tranquilizer again. His task has always been like this, to watch and wait. The sun is shining brightly, and there are no clouds. The Great Root once again explains the word, changeable. The morning of the first day out to sea was covered with snow, the afternoon of the first day was breezy and crisp, the second day was a day of wind and rain, and now it was the third day, finally ushering in the rare good weather. As soon as he reached the Great Root, Bucky felt more nervous. In the past few days, the command of the Bikudup was handed over to Mikkel, and he himself sat in the training room, practicing the ability of devil fruit and exercise the strength of the body, and at the same time let Shu Ma serve as a training partner to try to practice domineering. The Bikudup is not considered a big ship, but probably a medium-sized ship. After the handyman pirates left, the cabin was a bit empty, and the extra rooms were transformed into independent training rooms and merged into larger bathrooms and dining rooms. There are also some rooms for leisure and entertainment. Therefore, you don't have to worry about not having your own privacy and independent space, and you don't have to rest crowded together. At this time, Bucky sat quietly in the practice room imagining and feeling the development of the devil fruit, and Mochi's voice came from outside, Captain Bucky, I saw the island ahead. Bucky opened his eyes, stood up, and walked out. On the deck, everyone stood at the bow of the ship and looked into the distance. After sailing for so many days, the first island arrived was somewhat exciting, let alone a restless guy like Shu Ma, who yelled excitedly. Bucky walked to the front, and followed everyone to look at the small island in the distance. There were tall coconut trees growing on the shore, and a few figures in very cool clothes ran around on the golden beach, mixed with laughter. It looked like a summer island. As the Bikudup moved forward, the surrounding weather began to become warm and humid, and it finally landed after a while. At this time, I can see it more clearly. The sand on the beach is shining like grains of gold in the sun. Girls in bikinis and boys in shorts are laughing and playing, and there are many shops built on the beach. Greeting guests, the flag of the pirate ship did not have any influence on them, it seemed to be normal. That's right, after all, as the first island of the Great Route, countless pirates come every year, and the Bakudop is just an ordinary ship among many pirate ships. It's so hot here. Shuma scratched his head, took off the leaf necklace on his neck, panting like a dog. You're missing. Bucky couldn't help complaining when he saw his appearance. You should look at other people's situation. Shuma subconsciously looked at the hot sweat on Mikkel's face, then at his own attire, couldn't help shaking, and shouted, "Wow, it's not hot at all." Mikkel was already staggering, and her fluffy fur protected her from the cold in winter, but it was very uncomfortable in summer, and Shuma had always only wrapped her lower body in animal skins, and her upper body was bare-chested. Compared with it, how cool it was. It was Kia who thoughtfully held an umbrella for Mikkel, but the latter was very moved, and rubbed his furry face against Kia. As a result, Kia also sweated a lot on his face and smiled helplessly. Hello. An attendant in a suit walked up to the beach and shouted to everyone on board, "Please don't stop the boat here, please come with me." It's interesting. Bucky felt a little strange. Not only did he not panic when he met a pirate, but he was also so calm, and he offered a port of call. Sure enough, the Great Route is different from the place we stayed in before, and we have no defense against pirates. Kabaji and Moki, who came to the Great Route for the first time, also admired it. With Bucky's consent, the attendant led the way on the shore, and the ship approached the port where it was moored. There are many pirate ships in the port, and there are even a few warships mixed in, all living in peace. After getting off the boat, Bucky asked the attendant, "Whose territory is this?" The attendant bowed politely, "Hi, these things will be explained to you by the elder, please follow me." Bucky followed the attendant with a few people, and walked towards a hut near the beach. Looking all the way, most of the houses here are in the shape of bamboo buildings, and the people passing by only use simple cloth to cover their bodies. In the key parts, it is basically impossible to see anyone wearing 2 or 3 pieces of clothing, and it really is that one side supports the other side. After walking for a while, the attendant stood in front of a house and bowed his head respectfully. "My lord, a new passenger has arrived." A middle-aged man wearing black-rimmed glasses and a formal suit walked out of the room, looked at Bucky and his group in front of him, and greeted him with a smile on his face. "Hello. Welcome to the Island of Freedom, Shaw Navison. I am the Elder Frog, and I am the guide, responsible for receiving everyone." "It does look like frog ingredients," Shu Ma said without hesitation. The Elder Frog didn't get angry because of Shu Ma's tone, but just smiled back. On the contrary, the other party's actions made Bucky feel that something was wrong. It was not the individual, but the atmosphere of the entire island was too peaceful. "As I thought before, as the first island of the Great Route, there was not a single pirate here. Are you making trouble?" This kind of calm is really strange. The Elder Frog seemed to see Bucky's doubts, stretched out his hand to make a "please" gesture, and then slowly followed Bucky and said, "This Xa Navison is the personal product of Doflamingo, the 7th Martial Lord of the King. It has a certain deterrent effect on both pirates and the Navy. Pirates are not restrained and arrested here, but they dare not do anything wrong. The Navy will also temporarily put down the task of catching pirates. As you can see, it is a beautiful holiday island. As long as you can take out Bailey, you can enjoy a good hotel and beautiful scenery, as well as a variety of performances." The Elder Frog pushed his black-rimmed glasses and said calmly, "Pirates who have just entered the Great Route, as long as they have a heart, they will definitely not take the initiative to provoke the famous Shichibukai, and what the pirates talk about is nothing more than enjoyment. In such a place, as long as you are willing to spend some Baileys, it can be said to be a paradise for pirates to meet any needs and not be wanted. Secondly, as the Shichibukai under the king, it has an officially recognized legal status, and even the Navy cannot touch its private property. More importantly, Doflamingo and the Tianlong people still have some unclear relationships. To sum up, Doflamingo is indeed a cunning pirate who can expand his power and influence among all parties. Your Majesty's Shichibukai." Kabaji and Mochi looked at each other in shock. The Shichibukai, which is composed of 7 big pirates recognized by the world government, has catastrophic destructive power and a huge combat power that rivals the country. Only pirates who are well-known or powerful enough to shock everyone are eligible to be selected. Rumors of these people can often be heard even in the East China Sea. "So," Kabaji pointed to the huge flag on a tall building in the town, "is that the pirate flag of Shichibukai?" The flag fluttering in the air that Kabaji was pointing to was a round smiling face outlined with a few simple black lines, with a slash in the middle of the smiling face, which didn't look like a pirate flag. Bucky looked up at the flag over there. Although Doflamingo was a pirate, it was probably because the other party didn't want to admit it, so it didn't look like the skull flag. "That is the sign of Lord Doflamingo." The Elder Frog responded calmly, and continued, If you are willing to spend money to experience the summer style, please come with me. As the host, we will use the greatest enthusiasm come to entertain a few of you, but the ugly words come first. If you want to make trouble, you have to be careful. The words blurted out by the other party seem to have been rehearsed thousands of times in advance, and the instant change of tone is not abrupt, from the respectful at the beginning to the warning later. People will not only not be disgusted, but will indeed pay attention to the other party's words in their hearts. Probably pirates passing through here have been warned so. In that case, of course we are willing to spend money. Isn't the money saved by the pirates just to be able to spend it freely one day? Bucky's eyes showed a sly smile. He is not short of money now. After defeating Aaron, he took away 50% of the treasures collected by Aaron over the years as spoils, about 100 million berries. About 40 million has been spent on retirement fees and various expenses, and there are still 60 million left, which will be kept by Moki. Then you are our honored guest, Lord Bucky, Elder Frog said with a smile. Bucky was a little surprised. You know my name? However, we will record all the pirates with rewards, ranging from hundreds of millions to millions, to make every adult feel at home, and if any pirates with ulterior motives who want to sabotage and make trouble will inevitably be severely attacked and obliterated by Shichibukai. Your industry is really mature. Bucky clicked his tongue, leaving behind all kinds of backup, which is indeed very similar to Doflamingo's style. Thank you, Mr. Bucky. Please follow me to the Xanavason Hotel. As a big pirate with a reward of 48 million, you are eligible to stay. While leading the way, the Elder Frog introduced various customs here, such as the hundreds of years of hula dancing and the popular beach volleyball, which are a major local feature. Elder, do you have a place to change Bailey here? Mochi followed, and most of the property of nearly 40 million Bailey was heavy jewelry, which was placed in his body warehouse and took up a lot of space. There is a bank near the Xanavason Hotel. Please ask Mr. Mochi to exchange cash there. Seeing Moki's empty hands, the Elder Frog raised his black-rimmed glasses with some doubts, but kept the money well. Professionalism, no questions asked. Bucky and the others followed in the footsteps of the Elder Frog and walked along the Kibe path. This path is composed of all kinds of shellfish. The hard shell and various irregular shapes of shellfish can not only support all kinds of heavy objects passed through, and it also has the effect of massaging the soles of the feet. Not only the east coast of Xanavason, but the roads of the entire island are paved by this combination of shellfish. It is said that even the giants cannot easily break through this Kibe road. The Xanavason Hotel is located in the south of the east coast. After walking for a while, Bucky and others finally saw a 3-story building made of a magical red bamboo, which looked more like a vermilion palace. That's the one in front. Elder Frog showed a professional smile, Xanavason Hotel. Just as he was about to bring Bucky and his group inside, there were noises and shouts of support in the distance, and someone shouted excitedly, Heavenly King Lilina is here. Heavenly King. Bucky stopped instinctively, turned around involuntarily and looked at the noise in the distance, and remembered in his mind that there are 3 kinds of weapons in the world of One Piece that can destroy the world. Could it be this King of Heaven, who shouted in Lee? Lilina? Kia murmured in a low voice, I seem to have heard this name somewhere. Miss Lilina is a well-known entertainer under Pat Company. She has tens of millions of loyal fans all over the world. She is an amphibious artist who is good at drama, acting, and singing. A popular national idol. Elder Frog pushed his black-rimmed glasses and showed a professional smile. I wonder if Mr. Bucky noticed the person passing by just now? So it's the King of Heaven. Bucky breathed a sigh of relief, and was a little puzzled by the other party's question. Is there any problem with those pedestrians? Mr. Frog is talking about the skin and body of those people, right? Kia said, looking at the smiling Elder Frog. Mikkel also leaned aside. Lemon, I also feel a little bit when you say that. At a glance, the skin of everyone on the road is as smooth as a freshly peeled boiled egg. Even in such a hot summer island, it doesn't seem to be exposed to ultraviolet radiation, which is incredible. Elder Frog nodded. The 2 ladies have very good eyesight. Most of these passers-by are residents of the island. People on the island, regardless of gender, age, do not need to take care of themselves, and their skin will maintain full vitality and elasticity. The ratio of the body is also the perfect golden ratio. Because this is the island of idols, Xana Wyson. The Elder Frog's eyes burst out with a burst of heat. According to records, in the past 300 years, 32 Miss Universes, 43 heavyweight singers and 96 all-star singers have been born here. A world-renowned entertainer. Just as the Elder Frog finished speaking, Shu Ma asked unceremoniously, but the frog ingredients, why does your skin look the same as the skin of sugarcane? Shu Ma, how can you speak so impolitely? Mochi patted the other person's shoulder, his expression suddenly serious. Needless to say, The skin of frogs is of course wrinkled. The corner of the elder frog's mouth twitched, but he still had to keep smiling. Because I am not an aborigine on Navison Island. Hearing the elder frog's explanation, Bucky looked at the passers-by around him. Indeed, even the old man looked like a young man with white hair and a hale and hearty spirit. This made Bucky feel a little strange. He didn't know that the entertainment industry in this world is so developed that an artist can have tens of millions of fans. But if you think about it carefully, there are things like phone bugs in this world to spread signals and project images, and there will naturally be people who want to join the show business. People's lack of life also needs more entertainment and rich, so the so-called buyer's market and seller's market are naturally formed. Just as he was thinking, he saw two men in suits who looked like bodyguards opening the way ahead, and four burly men with bronze skin came over carrying a gorgeous gauze sedan chair. The noise in the distance was like waves on the sea. The sound was getting louder and louder, and the surrounding crowd also started to shout crazily. "Miss Lena, I love you, you are the only one in my life. Goddess, you are so beautiful, you will never tire of seeing your delicate face." Shouts one after another filled the entire road, and the dense crowd on both sides was like a boiling boiler, constantly making noise. A corner of the sedan chair covered by the tulle was lifted, revealing a very fair woman's face. This is a flawless face, which gives people a very amazing feeling at first glance, and the longer you look at this face, the more flavorful it becomes, and there is a hint of playfulness and tenderness of a girl in its maturity. Both Kaya and Mikkel, who are both women, praised sincerely. "This lady, this woman, is so beautiful." The surrounding crowd shouted even more crazily, but they surprisingly did not surround them. They were very orderly, which probably had something to do with the customs of the island. Suddenly, a figure sprang out from the crowd, pretending to fall on the ground in the middle of the road. "Ahem. I'm hurt, and I need Miss Lelena's love to recover." The sedan chair hadn't spoken yet, but the surroundings were already excited. "What do you want to do, you shameless person? Smelly shameless bastard, if you want to do something good to my goddess, go to hell with me. Damn pirate, you will go to the gallows sooner or later." Angrily cursing the street one after another, if there is such a thing as a language, I am afraid that this person will die hundreds of times. Bucky looked at the figure with triangular eyes and wearing a captain's cloak, and turned to the elder frog and asked, "This man is?" "This is the captain of the Jackal Pirates from the North Sea, Seedy. He is a big pirate with a bounty of 33 million. It is rumored that he is very lustful. His favorite thing is to rob women." Elder Frog did not hide anything, as he himself said, he will provide the best service with the greatest enthusiasm, including intelligence. "But he doesn't dare to cause trouble here, does he?" Bucky smiled. Elder Frog adjusted his black-rimmed glasses. "That's right, as long as he doesn't violate the laws here, we won't arrest him either." A hand protruded from the sedan chair, lifted the veil, and a woman with a curvy body came down. She was also dressed very coolly. Her upper body was a very half-open sportswear, and the pink string of the bikini could be seen inside. The lower body is in shorts, revealing round and slender thighs. The height is about 1.8 meters by visual inspection, and the proportion of the figure is just like what the Elder Frog said, it is the perfect golden ratio. With the face like an angel and the silky black hair, it does have a very special attraction. With a very gentle smile on Lelena's face, she stretched out her right hand unpretentiously. "Sir, are you okay? If you hurt yourself, you must treat it in time, and don't let the wound become infected." Andy was still in a daze, and the people around him were already biting the hem of their clothes, tears streaming down their faces. Simply an angel. My God, as expected of Goddess Lelena, this kind of heart is really broad. Woo, it's so touching, Lelena, we will always support you. Andy looked at his hands with some embarrassment, wiped his clothes twice, held them in Lelena's palm, and was pulled up by the ladder. "Since this gentleman is fine, I will excuse you." After Lelena finished speaking with a smile, she walked back to the sedan chair, and when she put down the light veil of the sedan chair, she didn't know whether it was intentional or not, she turned her head and glanced at Bucky. The four bearers bypassed Andy, who was sniffing his right hand like an idiot, and continued to move forward. The turbulent crowd continued to follow Lelena on the sedan chair. Several crew members who looked like Andy surrounded him. "Boss, what's wrong with you? You won't be fascinated by that woman." "Boss Andy, do you want us to snatch that woman over?" Andy slowly came back to his senses. His triangular eyes showed a treacherous look. "Steal? We didn't cause trouble for Kibahe's territory. But such a woman is challenging. I want to conquer this woman myself. There is no such thing in this world. A woman I can't get, Andy." "Masters." Elder Frog calmly reminded Bucky and the others who were attracted by the crowd, "Please come with me to the Navison Hotel." Looking at the deserted road in an instant, Bucky nodded, and walked towards the bamboo building with the others. This hotel is not an ordinary brick and tile structure, but a red bamboo that can radiate coolness as the skeleton and pavement. The hotel has 3 floors, each floor has dozens of rooms, and the second floor faces east. Shang even has a very wide open-air platform. Looking out, you can have a panoramic view of the entire beach. Every day, countless people hold parties and banquets here, and there are various performances at specific times. Under the leadership of Elder Frog, Buggy and the others were divided into 3 large rooms of over 100 square meters. In this way, it is convenient to take care of each other, and at the same time, everyone has an exclusive seat on the open-air platform to enjoy leisure sunbathing. Buggy changed into the crisp shorts provided by the hotel, sat on the red bamboo seat on the open-air platform, drank the iced coconut juice brought by the attendant, wore sunglasses, watched the parasol blooming on the sunny beach, and listened to the wandering people. The singer sang softly in the banana grove and coconut trees on the bank, and the hula dancers below performed the sound of flowers in the rhyme of the sea, and played beautiful romantic songs. Kaya and Mikkel were wearing loose coats, and they were also lying comfortably on the deck chairs on the deck. Since Buggy set an example to enjoy, they naturally had no reason to refuse. After lying down for a while, Buggy couldn't help but feel an illusion. This place doesn't seem to be the world of One Piece. It's so peaceful. Under the negotiation and tacit understanding of all parties, it has become a home that accepts and tolerates everyone. There is no place in the world, and Chi Wuhei's identity is indeed a two-way seasoning adjustment, which can mix pirates and navy together. It's just that this illusion is fleeting. Andy, the captain of the Jackal pirates from the North Sea, also seems to live here. After seeing Buggy, he raised his middle finger contemptuously, quite provocatively. In the next moment, Andy walked around to Kaya and Mikkel, and said frivolously, "You two beauties, how about having a drink with me? I will not treat you badly." "Sorry, I don't know how to drink." Kaya politely refused, and Mikkel snorted without looking back. Andy frowned tightly, and his voice became cold. "You two women are too ignorant. I am Andy, the big pirate jackal in the North Sea. If you don't want to die in vain just after entering the Great Route, I advise you to get rid of those bad habits." Bucky's voice was a little gloomy, but it came over forcefully. "The Great Route is not a place for you to play games." "Hey, boss, you were taught a lesson by pirates." "Boss Andy, this hateful red nose is too arrogant. In Beihai, even the Navy dare not talk to you like that." The pirates who were following Andy immediately shouted. Andy squinted his triangular eyes and stared at Buggy. After a while, he opened his mouth. "Forget it. He's a 48 million big pirate, it's not worth it to provoke him because of 2 women." He also learned about Buggy's personal information from the same pirate guide as Elder Frog, the big pirate with the highest reward in the East China Sea, Buggy the Clown. The pirates who can enter the Great Route are not useless guys, and they know how to measure. Buggy said something lightly, and put the sunglasses back on. He knew that although the captain of the Jackal Regiment intended to provoke, he still lacked the courage to do anything on the territory of Kibahei. Andy didn't seem to take Buggy's words seriously, turned around, walked to other seats in a flash, and flirted with other women. "What an annoying guy." Mikkel snorted towards Andy's back, but Kia persuaded with a smile. "Okay, don't be angry with this kind of person." The day passed quickly. In the evening, several beach volleyball exhibition games and close-range hula dances were rehearsed on the open-air platform. The Elder Frog at the side asked the recording pointer to record the time of the next island. "It will take about 3 days. Elder Frog gave the answer with a smile. Because the geomagnetism, celestial phenomena, ocean currents, and air currents of the Great Route are all chaotic, it is necessary to use the record pointer to store up the magnetic force of the next island before confirming the direction of navigation. Buggy is not in a hurry, just asking, and there is something in his heart end." When it was getting dark and the crowds on the platform and on the beach gradually thinned out, Buggy and Shuma returned to the room, and the rest of them also went back separately. About an hour after returning to the room, there was a knock on the door made of red bamboo. Buggy stopped exercising his fruit ability, and let Shuma, who was watching the show projected by the phone bug, open the door. A man wearing a black robe and tightly wrapped his whole body walked in. As soon as he entered, his eyes fell on Buggy's distinctive red nose. He licked the corner of his mouth, and then said, "You are the clown Buggy, right?" "Well, I am. Since this is the case, I will be blunt. Are you willing to join Chi Wuhei's army?" "Oh. You mean? You are the pirate with the highest bounty that has come to this island these days." The man in black licked the corner of his mouth habitually. "We can give you a chance to serve Lord Doflamingo, so you can also get the protection of Shichibukai. Kibukai is so cheap that they want to recruit workers in this way." Buggy smiled slyly. "This is the first time I've heard of it." The black-robed man paused noticeably, and his voice became colder. This is an invitation from the Supreme Master of the Seven Martial Seas. Not every pirate can get this kind of treatment, Bucky the clown. No, please go back. Bucky didn't say much. He couldn't accept being someone else's subordinate, subservient to him, and working his life for it, even if the 4 emperors came to him, let alone Shichibukai. The man in black robe licked the corner of his mouth, and said coldly, "You are a very courageous pirate, but courage alone is far from being able to survive on the Great Route, and you will regret losing this opportunity after all." After speaking, he turned and left the room indifferently. Doflamingo. Bucky murmured and sneered. In the early morning of the next day, there was a strong knock on the door, and then the red bamboo door was kicked open. Red nose, came Mickle's voice that was about to cry. As soon as he heard Mickle's emotional voice, Bucky had a bad premonition in his heart. Looking at Mickle with tears in his eyes, he said, "Don't worry, talk carefully. Kia is gone. I don't know where she went, what to do, I lost Kia, woo woo." Mickle cried, "Wow." Don't cry. Shuma stroked Mickle's fluffy head, comfortingly. "Don't worry, cat. How can you not be in a hurry?" Mickle slapped Shuma's hand away angrily, and said with a sob, Yesterday. She was still in the room at night, and when I got up this morning, I couldn't see her person. Go. Take me there to see what's going on." Bucky couldn't blame Mickle, got off the bamboo bed, put on his shoes, put his hands behind his back, and picked up the phone bug. "Dial a number. Hello. Is this the Elder Frog?" "Hee. It's Mr. Bucky. What can I do for you?" The black-rimmed glasses of the phone bug raised up, and it should be the Elder Frog over there who pushed the glasses. "My crew is missing, and it's in the Xe Navison hotel you provided. I think if you can't give me an explanation." Bucky's tone slowed down, and suddenly became gloomy. "I don't know there will be what kind of consequences." A few drops of cold sweat dripped from the phone bug. "Yes, I'll be here right away." Bucky hung up the phone, and ordered Shuma, "You go and call Moki and Kabaji." Shuma hurried away. Kaya and Mickle's room is right next to Bucky. The door is open at this time, the curtains block the sunlight they want to let in, and the inner room is very dark. Bucky walked in and looked around. The structure of this room was almost the same as the room he lived in. There were 2 big beds on the east and west corners, and 2 neat tables and chairs beside the big bed. The desk lamp, the book, Kuroka's medical knowledge, and the coconut husk with the straw inserted. The south side of the room is a projection screen that uses the phone bug to receive signals, and it is dark at this time. After a cursory glance around, he walked to the curtain on the east side and opened the pale yellow curtain. The early morning sun shone in, and the room suddenly became extremely bright. The field of vision became clearer, and then Kabaji and Moki walked in quickly, and asked in unison, "Miss Ship Doctor is missing?" "Yes, Kia is gone. But it's also possible that she just went for a walk." After finishing speaking, Bucky fell silent. This kind of thinking was too optimistic and unrealistic. He then turned to Kabaji or said, "You all come over and search. If you have any clues, tell me right away." "Yes, Captain Bucky." Bucky stared at Mickle. "Mickle, think about it again. What happened last night?" "Yesterday." Mickle's eyes were red, and he frowned as he recalled, "When we arrived in the room yesterday, after we took a shower, we watched the phone bug video for a while, and then I felt very sleepy and fell asleep in a daze. Yep, Lemon seems to be still reading medical books, and when she comes together in the morning, she's gone. If she goes out alone, it's impossible not to say hello to me." When Mickle fell asleep, Kia was still reading. Bucky thought to himself, walked beside the desk, and picked up the closed medical book on the table. The cover of the medical book was a very simple white flipping through the cardboard. There are various medical terms and typical cases inside, with elegant text notes beside it. This is one of the pages of the medical book actually had an inverted triangle crease, which looked like it was newly folded. Bucky glanced through it at a glance. The words on it were all about the shapes, characteristics and medical uses of various herbs, which could not be seen at all. What a trick. He put down the medical book and was about to pick up the coconut husk with the straw on the table to investigate, when Huma suddenly yelled, "Bucky, come and take a look." "What did you find?" Bucky walked over quickly, while Shuma pointed to a shallow, almost invisible half-footprint on the windowsill. Bucky frowned, jumped onto the windowsill, and stepped down hard on the windowsill made of red bamboo. When he lifted his feet, there was no trace of dust or footprints left on the windowsill. He turned around and asked, "Shuma, can you see the dust on it?" Shuma watched carefully from the windowsill. "There is a very vague footprint. That is to say, the guy who left footprints of this level would definitely not be Kia." Bucky looked at the half-footprint. "This person must be heavier than my weight, so the traces of the footprints it is also more obvious. Or, the other party is carrying something heavy enough, such as a person. Kaya should have been taken away here. Bucky opened the window and looked out. The height of the first floor is about 5 meters, and the distance between the windowsill and the ground is about 6 meters. Climb up the wall. Bucky stretched out his body and looked to the side. The left side of the window was the room he lived in, and the right side was the window on the landing. Following that direction, he could see a familiar pirate leaning his neck and sticking out his head. Bucky stared at the man. This pirate. Wasn't he one of Endy's subordinates from yesterday? Thinking of yesterday's provocation and Endy's style, Bucky had some guesses in his heart, jumped out of the window, and walked out of the room. But when he just walked to the door, there was a sudden gunshot. He walked quickly to the corridor, and what he saw was a middle-aged man in a suit lying in a pool of blood, the Elder Frog. In the corridor directly in front is Endy, the captain of the Jackal Pirates. The pirate next to him blew the white smoke from the muzzle, and looked at this side with a grinning grin. Yo. I finally met you, Bucky the Clown. There was a sinister smile on Endy's face, looking very arrogant, which was the complete opposite of yesterday's restrained appearance. Bucky knelt down and sniffed the Elder Frog's breath. He was already dead. Then he glanced around, feeling extremely puzzled. Such a loud gunshot did not alarm the security personnel of this hotel. The key is that Endy really dared to make trouble on Shisabukai's territory. His full confidence is that where did it come from? You took my crew. Bucky stared at him. Oh. You mean the chick on your boat? Endy's triangular eyes flickered, and he said sinisterly, she was indeed captured by me. If you want to save her life, you'd better stand obediently. Stay there. I remember that I have warned you. Bucky's face suddenly became gloomy, his knees slightly bent. The Great Root is not a place for you to play games. Lanzhou. You by you. The right foot danced swiftly, and the white almost visible slashing air waved from the foot like a bright moon. After receiving Jabba's instruction in Gemini Cape, Bucky suddenly became enlightened, and practiced his leg strength repeatedly. At the moment when he launched the Haze foot, his leg strength swung quickly, and he used the separated foot to perform a 360-degree turn before bursting out with strength, so the airflow it is in the shape of a disc, and its power is also several times stronger. Compared with the kick that hurt Aaron at the beginning, it is not too weak, and it can be used more casually and easily. The white airflow blasted past at an extremely fast speed, and the narrow corridor left Endy and the others with nowhere to hide. The violent sound of the airflow exploded the moment it hit them, forming a powerful wind flow that swept away the surrounding people. The windows were blowing loudly. The red bamboo walls on both sides of the corridor, which are as hard as metal, were each broken with a hole about 5 centimeters deep, extending a score of more than 10 meters. It's really terrifying power. Endy's feet and hands were stretched out on the bamboo wall comically, and his whole body was pressed against the ceiling, his teeth trembling slightly, and he looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. The few pirates under him were pushed out by him as meat targets at the moment when the slashing airflow flew in just now. After gaining a moment to breathe, they hurriedly used their bodies against the walls on both sides to barely escape the blow. I'll give you another chance to speak. Bucky narrowed his eyes slightly to hide his cunning gaze. Where is my crew? Endy jumped down from the ceiling, regained his composure in the blink of an eye, and looked at Bucky ferociously. I was indeed scared by you just now, but don't be self-righteous. I will let you see my true strength. After all, his body began to swell rapidly. The muscles on his body exploded layer by layer. Yellow and black manes grew on the surface of the skin. The nails of his hands became sharp and long, and the strong captain's cloak was instantly supported by his body cracked open. 2 eyes revealed scarlet gazes, and the teeth turned into long and narrow fangs. Endy's fangs were dripping with covetousness. He opened his bloody mouth wide, and clenched his fists tightly. I am a devil fruit capable person, the owner of Jackal Fruit. No matter who you are a joke in front of my absolute power. Devil Fruit ability user. Bucky didn't show any surprise, and took out the 10 hands behind his back. It's easier to handle this way. Really? Endy stuck out an exaggeratedly long tongue, licked the back of his hand, stepped on his feet, and his wolf eyes suddenly widened. Taste my bloody hell. His 2 sharp claws violently grabbed Bucky, and under the reflection of the surrounding red bamboo walls, it fell on Bucky's body like a dense red net with thorns, and then he pierced Bucky with his long claws. Bucky's chest, protruding from his back. I said, in front of my absolute strength. Endy said halfway, when a thick stick was pressed against his abdomen, and there was an extremely cold feeling in an instant, as if all the strength in his body had been deprived usually. The light black mane, fangs, and slender nails all returned to their original state, and Bucky ruthlessly picked up his neck, hanging in the air. Looking at Bucky, who was not harmed by his attack at all, Endy finally showed panic on his face. Heilushi and the natural devil fruit ability. You're half right. Bucky's eyes showed a cunning. The grip in his hand became stronger and stronger, and he relentlessly pinched the opponent's thick neck, and he could vaguely see that his neck was pinched. The color of the red handprints is still deepening, and Andy feels that he is going to be out of breath. Where the hell is my crew? Buggy threw Andy heavily on the ground, moved his hands upwards, and touched the neck of the opponent. He was afraid that if he really became ruthless, the force in his hands would directly break the neck of the opponent. In this case, the leads will be cut off. Well, boss Andy. Several silhouettes of pirates walked out of the room in the distance. Seeing the captain's distressed appearance and his companion lying down and bleeding everywhere, his brain got hot and he hurriedly rushed over with the weapon in his hand. Don't get in the way. Kabaji behind Buggy went up to him, raised his knife and dropped it. Snowflakes were flying, blood splashed on the pirates standing in the front row, and they fell to their knees unconsciously. On the ground, the bento-faced pirates behind saw the scene in front of them, and immediately stopped in fear. One of the pirates slashed by Kabaji seemed to be more tenacious, holding the long and narrow knife wound on his body in pain, and stood up with trembling legs, while the pirates behind him danced and cheered. Mate Rocco, you are a 6 million pirate, please defeat this swordsman. Captain Rocco, you are the battle captain except boss Andy, you will definitely not lose to this little unknown pirate. Hearing the encouragement of his subordinates, Rocco spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell to the ground with a bang. The pirates behind him took 2 steps back in fright and remained silent. This kind of guy is also worth 6 million. Buggy glanced at him with disdain. As far as the combat power that can be seen alone, Admiral Click, who is far away in the East China Sea with the same reward amount, is not alone or as a whole. Far beyond this pirate, it can indeed be seen that in order to create an appearance of peace in the East China Sea, the world government has suppressed the reward lists of the pirates to a very low level. Buggy said to Kabaji and Moki, Kabaji, Moki, go to those rooms to see if Kia is there. The two answered, yes, and walked towards the rooms where Andy and his subordinates lived. The pirates in the corridor kept retreating to both sides of the corner without fighting. Kabaji and the two didn't care about these little shrimps, they moved very quickly, and it took only a moment to search through the 3 rooms of nearly 20 meters. When they came out, they shook their heads at Buggy at the same time. Buggy turned his head to look at Andy, and slowly narrowed his eyes. Okay, I'll give you another 3 seconds, this is my last patience. I. Andy shouted with all his strength in a weak voice. The feeling that his life was about to come to an end made his hands and feet cold, and the cold sweat on his forehead couldn't stop flowing. Let's talk. Buggy let go of 10 hands slightly, and Andy finally had a chance to breathe, and immediately said hoarsely, it's not me, I didn't capture your crew. Not you. It's really not me, I really don't know where your crew is, I just made a joke just now, I don't have any malicious intentions. Since you have no malicious intentions, then why did you kill my guide? Buggy stared into Andy's eyes, with a cold expression on the corner of his mouth. Your actions don't look like simple provocations. Is a planned and premeditated action. I. Andy's triangular eyes couldn't help turning around, his face became even more flustered, he muttered twice, and finally said in a low voice, I see, I will take you to where that woman is. Very good. Buggy suddenly stretched out his index finger, stabbed it into Andy's right thigh with a finger gun, and then pulled it out amidst the latter's heart-piercing screams, and suddenly Andy's right thigh, the wound on the foot, was bleeding profusely. This degree of wound can weaken his mobility, and it will not let him die, which is convenient for control. Lead the way. Buggy loosened his grip on Andy's neck, allowing him to stand up. Andy stood up with his hands on his hands, and threw something invisible in his hands into his mouth in an instant. Buggy noticed his small movements and immediately pressed his hands towards it, but it was still too late. With one shot, Andy's body suddenly rushed out towards Kabaji and Moki at the moment when Shisho was about to approach. In the process of rushing out, his body once again transformed into a jackal covered with light black mane. Not only did Buggy's stab wound not visible on his right foot, but his movements were more agile than before. Stop him. Buggy immediately shouted at Kabaji and Mochi, ignoring the other party's strangeness. Kabaji and Moki moved towards Andy at the same time, but the latter had no desire to fight at all. In an instant, he exploded at a faster speed like a multi-acceleration jet, and staggered past the two of them with lightning and flint. Blink disappeared at the end of the corridor. Kabaji and Moki rushed to nothing, looked at each other in surprise, with complicated expressions on their faces. This jackal is so fast. Buggy frowned, miscalculated. What did this guy eat? Shuma. You chase that jackal along the blood trail, don't let him run away. Yeah. Although Shuma was usually not in the mood, he was still very concerned about the safety of his companions, so he just nodded his head and ran quickly along the long corridor. Buggy raised his head and looked around the corridor. The surveillance phone bugs in the corner of the corridor closed their eyes, tacitly, at this moment. Come less and less. Kia disappeared. The elder frog was victimized. The jackal pirates took the initiative to provoke, and the surveillance phone bug did not move. What happened to all this? Kabaji, Mochi, I need all the information from these pirates. They will entrust you for interrogation. If you don't cooperate, kill them on the spot. After Buggy finished speaking, he walked down the stairs alone. The downstairs was very quiet, and the atmosphere was a little permeable. The young lady who was in charge of reception in front of the counter yesterday collapsed to the ground with terrified eyes. The dozen or so armed guards around were all lying in a pool of blood. I don't know if it was the refraction of the sun as a result. The blood at this time emits a strange golden light. Buggy walked over with a solemn expression, sniffing one by one. All of them were dead. Is it the jackal's hand? What about Kia? Where was Kia taken? Buggy was full of doubts, and his heart was a little heavy. This island was not as reliable as he imagined, and the word safety really didn't exist in the dictionary of pirate world. Suddenly, a cloud-shrouded figure walked out of the dark room, and when the white smoke around him cleared, he saw a man with scars on his face, wearing a white suit, holding a exaggerated cigarette stick, put the cigarette holder in his mouth and took 2 puffs, and said slowly, "Hello, your crew is missing." "Who are you?" Buggy looked at the other party vigilantly. There are so many dead people here, but this man survived, and he seemed to know something else. "My name is Alex, don't be nervous. I'm just a lonely pirate." Alex held the nearly 1 meter long tobacco rod in his hand, put the cigarette holder at the corner of his mouth and took 2 puffs, raised his head at a 45-degree angle to blow out smoke rings, looked at the ceiling in a daze, and suddenly the tobacco rod in his hand slipped down going. The iron cigarette holder knocked against his teeth that looked like yellowed ancient porcelain. "It hurts, hurts." He hurriedly covered his teeth and said vaguely, "Stop wasting my time." Buggy frowned. "What the hell do you know?" "Don't be too impetuous. I guess your crew should have been captured by that family. Shichibukai Doflamingo." When the other party said this, Buggy remembered the mysterious person who came to invite last night. "No, it's not." Alex took another puff of the cigarette holder without haste. "It's the one-eyed family." "One-eyed?" Buggy squinted his eyes halfway, and asked, "Isn't this the territory of Doflamingo? How could it be involved with some one-eyed family?" "So, don't be too impetuous. Do you really think this is Shisabukai's territory?" Buggy was stunned. "Isn't it, that flag? One-eyed borrowed it from Shisabukai, but they pay a certain fee every year as an exchange condition. For one-eyed, a little wealth can maintain the long-term peace and stability of the island, so that pirates with treasures can enjoy themselves here. Consumption, and for Shisabukai, a harmless banner can harvest a lot of wealth every year. This kind of cooperation relationship, both parties are naturally happy to see the results." "So." Buggy narrowed his eyes, bent his knees, and shot a transparent slashing airflow towards Alex at an extremely fast speed. The cigarette rod held by Alex was spinning like a fan, and with a wave, the slashing airflow was bounced along his tobacco rod to the counter, knocking the waiter who had been dead for a long time paralyzed on the counter. The long hair and the flat glass were cut off by a third. Buggy sneered. "I don't believe that an insignificant person would know so much news. So, don't be too impetuous. I'm not an irrelevant person." Alex held the tobacco rod in his hand, put it behind his back, and sighed heavily. "All the companions who sailed with me died here, and now I am the only one left. For this reason, I self-destructed and hibernated here for 8 years, inquiring about all the news. Since you are so anxious about the lives of your companions, then you should be able to understand my feelings. My companion was ruthlessly killed, leaving only one person alone here." At the end, he roared suddenly. Buggy took a deep breath and looked at the other party with heavy eyes. "Reveal everything you know." "Okay, I'll tell you," Alex said slowly as his face regained his composure. "The ruler of the Cyclops family is the minister most valued by the current king of Santa City, a member of the world government. Even this island that originally belonged to Santa City was placed under the name of Cyclops under the king's instruction, and became his in order to prevent the island from being destroyed by pirates. Cyclops cooperated with Doflamingo from the Kibahe to borrow a flag to protect the island in the name of the Shisabukai. But the one-eyed family's business is not only to drive the development of the industry here, but also to investigate all the pirates who pass through this place. Whenever the pirates are famous, he will use the name of Shichibukai to win them over, and in fact let them become his subordinates. To expand their own power, if they do not follow, they will take various coercive means to intimidate. Of course, very few people refuse the invitation of Shisabukai. Even if they find out that they are not loyal to Shisabukai, it is already too late gone." Buggy frowned slightly. "You mean that because I rejected the invitation of the Shisabukai last night, my crew members were taken away by the one-eyed clan? Their purpose was to make me surrender?" Alex shook his head. "I'm not sure, but it's very possible, because only the insiders in the hotel have the opportunity to tamper with and take your crew away quietly, and this hotel, his name is actually One-Eyed. Buggy wanted to ask again, but Mochi's voice came from upstairs. Captain Buggy. I probably know your purpose. Buggy glanced at Alex with twinkling eyes and walked upstairs. It's really easy to talk to smart people. Alex took a puff from the cigarette holder, exhaled a white smoke from his mouth, and followed him. Back in the room on the second floor, the group of pirates who were originally jackal pirates had been bundled into a pile with bruised noses and swollen faces. It seemed that after some interrogation, Kabaji came up and said, Captain Buggy, I have already asked, because Andy lives alone in the room, so these pirates don't know the situation, but one of the pirates said that he saw a mysterious man in a black robe walking into Andy's room. The man in black robe? Buggy recalled in a daze. And Alex, who followed behind, said, let me tell you something, since you rejected the invitation of the One-Eyed family, the other party's target will naturally shift to the guy named Andy, and ask the jackal Andy to take your head. It proves that he is qualified to join the One-Eyed family, but I think his ultimate goal is to let you take the initiative to fight, and then choose the winning side between the two of you. I have been here for 8 years, Pirate Fire. It's not the first time I've seen the situation of the merger, the winner and the loser. What evidence do you have to prove that the One-Eyed family you said is true, and who did the work of those dead people downstairs? Buggy didn't fully believe Alex's statement, even though the other party's purpose was obvious. You can take a look at the dead people downstairs. They all have a vertical eye tattoo on their right inner wrists. This is the symbol of the One-Eyed family. If you ask why I know so well. Alex held his right hand, his white clothes were pulled open, his wrists were turned up, revealing a gray vertical eye tattoo. I am also a member of the One-Eyed family. In order to find out the truth about the killing of my partners back then, I destroyed my appearance and joined the One-Eyed family as a little pirate. After so many years, I finally figured out the information about this family. The members present a pyramid structure from bottom to top, which are the outermost and largest number of gray vertical eyes, the middle level of black vertical eyes with the strength of 100 people, and the topmost, very few red vertical eyes. Above the vertical eye is the only one in power, One Eye. After Alex finished speaking in one breath, his tone began to slow down. Those people downstairs should have been killed by the violent Andy a few hours earlier than now. He must have, eating, by mistake, Alpiro Sergora. Alpiro Sergora. Buggy saw this word in the medical book just now, on the page that was folded in a triangle. Alex took a puff from the cigarette holder and exhaled the smoke ring. This herb is called madness grass for short. It is a kind of poison that grows in warm and humid areas. It is clearly listed as a prohibited herb by the world government. It is prohibited to sell, and of course, the growth environment of this herb is far from the two restrictions of warm and humid, and there are other more stringent requirements, so the quantity is very small. This hallucinogenic effect releases the worst instinct in human nature, but if you take it for the second time, you can make your body burst into a powerful force. You mean? It is impossible for a pirate like him who has just entered the Great Route to know and get the fanatic grass. The only explanation is given by the guy from the One-Eyed family. For those who submit, the One-Eyed family will of course give some people can't stop. It's good, but I think he couldn't hold it anymore. Curiosity drove him to eat it, and finally killed those people downstairs violently. You saw it all. Seen it myself. Then why didn't you stop him? This is what I'd like to see. I wish all the members of the One-Eyed family would die, so that my companions who were ruthlessly killed could rest in peace. Alex's forehead was rarely bruised, with a ferocious look on his face. Scars look even more terrifying. Buggy was silent for a while, then narrowed his eyes and looked at Alex. So, you have been eyeing me for a long time. As long as I can crush Andy with the strength I show, then I am qualified to become someone who has the same goal as you, partner. Isn't that why you were willing to disclose everything to me? You underestimate me too much. Alex shook his head unhurriedly. His tone sounded very sincere. What I value is your anxiety about the disappearance of your partner. Let me see when it comes to the figure of the partner who helped me in the same boat back then. This is the main reason why I am willing to bet on you. Alex's words are very sincere, not like a lie. If it is true what he said, the One-Eyed family deliberately created Andy's provocation in order to determine the winner in the battle between themselves and Andy, forcing themselves to take the shot. In this way, even if he wins, the opponent can take Kia as a blackmail. This should be the real purpose of the opponent, to kidnap Kia. Buggy pondered for a moment, then asked, if that's the case, why did he kill the Elder Frog? Alex shook his head. I don't know, maybe he made a claim and wanted to blame you for the murder. What advice do you have for our next course of action? Your crew members are not in a dangerous situation right now. We need to escape from here first, and then go to the stronghold of the One-Eyed family, the king's capital of Santa City, Gallo. Escape. Why escape? These guides will bring phone bugs with them. When this elder frog came, he must have seen the dead person on the first floor of the hotel, but at this time he will not press the emergency button on the phone bug, but when he encounters an accident, before he dies, he will definitely dial the phone bug he carries with him. Once the vertical eyes on this island receive the signal, they will act immediately, whether it is you or the other pirates in the hotel. Before Alex finished speaking, the sound of fighting and crying came from outside the hotel. He speeded up his speech. The iron-blooded team that maintains the order of Exe Navison, the Black Vertical Eye, 200-man team, each has the strength to offer at least tens of millions of bounties, and has a pill made of 1 gram of fanatic grass on his body. After eating, it can temporarily paralyze the painful nerves and increase the manpower by 30, as well as the Gray Vertical Eye, 200-man team. If you fight with them here, it will not do any good, and it will cause more trouble. You know a lot. Don't think I've been doing nothing during the 8 years I've been here. Alex glanced around. There is a pirate in this Exe Navison hotel with a bounty of 6 million, and there are 3 hotels nearby that offer pirates, and all pirates will be included in the list. Cleaning the target. This is the continuous sit policy of the iron-blooded team, Black Vertical Eye. But compared with those pirates who don't know, you have now understood the situation, so you'd better make a decision quickly. Pod. At this moment, the phone bug in his pocket rang. Bucky took it out and connected the phone. A message came from the other end of the phone. Hello, is this Bucky the Clown? Who are you? If you want that woman, come to Jalo, I will wait for you here, ha 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 ha. The voice over there was extremely arrogant, and after finishing speaking, he hung up the phone without giving Bucky any chance to ask back. Santin seedy. Bucky thought in his heart. What Alex said was absolutely correct. His phone number was only registered at this Exe Navison hotel. Since the other party could dial his phone number, it also means that it is indeed related to the owner of this hotel, the Cyclops family. Mikkel has been listening quietly from the sidelines, and at this moment he finally couldn't help but say, but the record pointer is not full, we simply cannot leave this island. Mochi also said, also, what if Shu Ma didn't see us when he came back? Don't worry about repairing the horse, as long as you put a few destruction peppers on the road, he will follow the smell all the way. As for... In the middle of Bucky's speech, he stopped, and looked at a dozen men with bamboo clips on their wrists who appeared at the stairs. They held a reward list in their hands. Bucky pirates, the target is confirmed. Just after finishing speaking, the group of people who blocked the stairs rushed up like hyenas, attacking everyone with a big black knife in their hands. Bucky, who was standing by the stairs, waved his right foot, and the pale white slashing airflow was instantly released. The 4 naked men in the front all tacitly blocked the long black swords in front of them at the same time. After seeing the power, he just took a wrong step backwards and rushed up quickly. Captain Bucky, you go first, I'll block them. Kabaji pulled out Sakura Fubuki, leaned in front of him, and blocked the 4 black long knives that were swung down at the same time in front of him. Meet on the Bikadup. After leaving these words, Bucky decisively opened the window of the corridor. Mochi, Mikkel, and the tobacco rod, let's go first. After all, he jumped off the 6-meter-high second floor by himself, and several people behind him also jumped down one after another. Bucky and his friends, don't try to run away. Just as he landed, several naked men with bamboo clips on their wrists rushed over with long knives. Sharp storage. Rotating sword. Mochi held the stabbed long knife in his left hand, and spun his right hand towards the man's chest. Suddenly, the man flew upside down like a shell, and there was a mosquito coil with 4 circles on his chest. Bloody mouth. Static fur. Cross-cut. Mikkel crossed his hands and drew 2 intersecting white lines in the air with static electricity. The 2 naked men fell to the ground numbly, and there was a slight burning smell. Alex knocked a naked man into the air with a cigarette stick, stood beside Bucky and said, as for storing magnetic power, don't worry, I have a permanent pointer to the Kingdom of Santander. How about we cooperate? It's really a group of annoying guys. At this juncture, they are going to make trouble. Bucky's body was cut in half by a black sword, and his finger gun that could leave marks on steel was pierced into the hand. The heart of the naked man with a dark sword and an expression of disbelief was pulled out immediately. The man collapsed on the ground weakly, and the sword fell out of his hand. Bucky looked back at Alex next to him. Then let's cooperate. When I regain my ship, I will go to Santistan immediately. I've been waiting for your words. Alex showed a candid smile on his face, but the scars on his face looked a little scary. You are the only guy the first feel I can trust all these years. Don't say such vague things. Bucky looked around at the naked men holding black swords. Let's split up. Since you've been here for 8 years, you should know what to do with the pirate ship. Let's go to the port and meet there. No problem. I will wait on your ship. After Alex finished speaking, he quickly rushed out of the encirclement and disappeared among the crowd. It's really tough. Bucky grabbed one of the naked men covered in scars, and tore off the bamboo clip on his wrist. There was indeed a vertical eye tattoo on his wrist, with a black pupil in the middle. This is the black vertical eye, at the middle level of the pyramid. Although the attack power of this group of people is not high, they can't hurt themselves, but their endurance is definitely at the level of Crow. If you want to kill a black vertical eye, the fastest way is to make it lose its combat power and then make up for it. Only a knife can completely kill him, but the black vertical eyes that swarmed up did not give Bucky a chance at all. It was very difficult to deal with. Mikkel, Mochi, you guys go first. Bucky kicked away a black vertical eye, who came up from a siege, and threw a small bag of Huma's 10-minute love, which was chewed as a snack, to Mochi. Use this to lure Shuma back to the boat. Yes, Captain Bucky. Then I'll leave it to you, Uncle Red Nose. After Mochi and Mikkel finished speaking, they rushed in two opposite directions, taking away a circle of enemies chasing them, and their figures gradually disappeared. Out of range. After Bucky watched the two leave, his body began to curl up quickly, and he began to concentrate his strength in his abdomen with the return of his life. Take your life, Bucky the Clown. The 6 black vertical eyes stared angrily, and in the blink of an eye, they raised the black sword in all directions, and slashed at Bucky's head in all directions without any dead ends. Torn apart. Mass burial. The accumulated power exploded in an instant, and Bucky's body was torn apart in an instant, and the airflow formed by countless slashes and dents, dazzling point attacks burst out to the surroundings. The knives in the hands of the 6 black vertical eyes at the front have not yet fallen, and the whole body has been flying upside down with bruises. There were countless gusts of wind, and without knowing what happened, severe pain had already entered his mind. Bang bang bang. Bang bang. Like the sound of gunshots and wind, a thin mist of blood began to spread around, and unconsciously, the mist of blood began to thicken. After the screams of pain one after another lasted for nearly a minute, they finally disappeared. In the center of all the black vertical eyes that fell to the ground, a man seemed to manifest from the air, covered in blood, very terrifying. Jabba said in Cape Twins before, some people can break steel with a punch, while some people can't even split wood. In addition to their own physical fitness, what is more important is the control of strength. A punch is not necessarily all the power. The moment the fist is swung, the power is already weakening and disappearing. If you want to use all the power in the body without losing it, it is more important to control the tiny details. After scanning the lifeless enemies around him and feeling his own situation, Bucky thought to himself, Mr. Jabba is right. After using mass burial again, he obviously felt that he still lacked control over his power. Even if he tried to feel it in a small direction, this intermittent feeling still couldn't be connected together. Just like every day a book that is torn apart every few pages, the missing pages can only be supplemented by connecting the stories before and after, and now it is in this state of insufficient fine-tuning of the body. Bucky wiped the thick blood on his face that blocked his vision, and walked towards the port where the Bakudop was moored. Just after taking a few steps, a very strange melody came over. Several girls in hula dancers in the distance let go of their voices and sang songs with incomprehensible tones and beats. There was no sound of airflow, like breathing, very absurd and weird. Walking a few steps forward, a hole suddenly sank into the ground, and Bucky's ankle sprained, and was immediately wrapped in countless sands, followed by a strange pain in his foot. Bucky sucked in a breath of cold air, and immediately pulled out the foot from the sandpit, only to see a palm-sized shell tightly biting his foot, closing the 3 thumbs on the foot. Inside the shell. Is this thing alive? Bucky's feet were separated from his legs and stood in front of his eyes, and then he broke open the shell vigorously, and there was nothing inside. Suddenly, the other foot standing on the ground felt a slight vibration on the ground, and Bucky suddenly felt a bad premonition, and quickly backed away with one foot. The surrounding sand shook violently, and in an instant, the sand with a radius of tens of meters began to stir, forming a large pit of quicksand that was constantly rotating and sinking. Beside the quicksand, hundreds of shells could be seen rhythmically moving on the sand. Jumping, quicksand is caused by these things underneath. And all the shells on the Kibe Road also began to move strangely, jumping in 2s and 3s, the number became larger and larger, and in the blink of an eye, they formed a shell giant 6 or 7 meters high. Bucky's scalp was a little numb, he threw away the shell in his hand, and then turned his head to look solemnly at those hula dancers with weird singing voices. When looking back at the hula dancer, the group of black vertical eyes, in the field of vision staggered like zombies and stood up again. The blood on the body also began to coagulate, and the muscles on the arms were twitching one by one. It began to swell, like hard stones, shiny in the sun. Bucky frowned and murmured, "It's the gram of fanatic grass that Alex said. so that the dying people can regain their vitality. All the shells on the shell giant's body made a popping, crackling sound of opening and closing, and the fist made of shells grabbed Buggy directly. Buggy always felt that this thing was a bit disgusting, so he used the razor to retreat a distance of more than 10 meters, and then raised his foot to release a light white slashing airflow. Swish. The gap between the right arm and body that the shell giant grabbed was cut off by the airflow, and it turned into countless shells and fell to the ground rustlingly. Immediately afterwards, the wind blew up from behind. Buggy lowered his head, dodged the brute force punch on the back of the head, and punched back hard with his elbow, and the man who was almost stuck behind was instantly knocked out. Without giving Buggy a chance to catch his breath, another person came and swung a punch. A huge force smashed Buggy's right thigh into sand grains, and shot him at a distance of nearly 10 meters. The shell giant behind him, the shells on his body kept opening and closing, facing the minced meat that was photographed, as if he wanted to eat it. Buggy's heart tightened, and his body instantly rushed towards the direction where the minced meat flew out, and the minced meat was also pulled by the direction of his body, and flew back to Buggy's thigh the moment the shell giant approached, and overlapped on the gap. However, the situation is still very bad. The oncoming shell giant is only 1 meter away from him, and the shells with countless mouths on his body are biting towards him frantically. Torn apart, guns hit. Buggy's 2 hands gathered strength, separated in an instant, and blasted towards the shell giant like a gust of wind and rain. Bang bang bang, the shell giant kept retreating, and the shells on his body fell off piece by piece, and finally couldn't support it, like broken bones, all fell off and scattered all over the ground. Just after the shell giant was dealt with, more and more black vertical eyes surrounded him again, just like the strengthened zombies in a disaster movie. No matter in terms of speed, strength or ability to resist attacks, they were all powerful. It's even more exaggerated than when I didn't take drugs. Buggy just knocked dozens of people into the air, and more people surrounded him. Some even bit Buggy's leg with their teeth. Lanzhou. You by you. Buggy's right foot separated and spun several times, and instantly burst out a disc-shaped white slashing airflow that broke the man's entire set of teeth. Half of his head flew out, and blood splashed like a fountain. The man's arms seemed to be still consciously grabbing Buggy's leg, and it took more than 10 seconds before he froze and died completely. This is already the 10th time that Buggy has used Moon White Jade in this battle. He kept panting, and his physical strength was getting bigger and bigger in the siege of these fearless, black vertical eyes. 60 to 70 corpses with stumped limbs and arms were already scattered on the ground, but the group of guys who ate the fanatic grass didn't know what fear was. And the shells scattered all over the ground behind him were like wriggling maggots in the singing of the hula dancer, slowly gathering and taking the shape of a giant, but just after forming a body, they couldn't wait to slap Buggy with their palms. The moment the shell giant waved his hands over, Buggy ran up with his feet on his arms, kicked on the shell giant's head, and sprinted forward with his strength. Then he stepped on the ground quickly, shaved 3 times in a row, and disappeared in an instant surrounded by the black vertical eyes. He rushed to the port where the ships were moored. Just like what Alex said, there was no need for him to entangle with these black vertical eyes. The strength of these guys after taking drugs almost caught up with half of Aaron. The most important thing is that they don't feel pain and fear at all. If it weren't for killing so many people to reduce the thickness of the encirclement, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to get out. Along the way, you can see piles of pirates being surrounded by black vertical eyes, and the sound of fighting resounds throughout the alley. This is the power accumulated by the one-eyed family for so many years. Buggy continued to run forward, turning his head and not watching those fights anymore. In the world of One Piece, whoever has strength, who doesn't think he is the best in the world? One thing, there are almost no people who are willing to remain unknown. In the original book, the pirates who are just supernovas dare to challenge the 4 emperors who rule the sea 2 years later. This is probably the most intuitive and representative mentality of the pirates in the new era. Now, and this one-eyed is low-key like a heterogeneous, recruiting pirates, developing power, and even pulling the banner of Kibahe as a tiger skin. Because of the resistance and containment of pirates in the other 3 hotels who didn't understand the situation, Buggy successfully arrived at the port where the ship was moored after half an hour. There were countless pirates and the corpses of the island guards lying on the sand. Blood soaked the sand, staining it black and red. There were several people standing on the deck of the Bickadup, Alex, Mochi and Mikkel, all with tired faces and scars on their bodies. Buggy jumped up, landed on the deck, and asked, "Have Shuma and Kabaji not come yet?" Mochi replied, "Don't worry about that bastard Kabaji. If Shuma is concerned, I've already put destruction pepper along the way, and he should follow the smell. When are we going?" Alex took a meter-long tobacco rod, took 2 puffs in his mouth, exhaled a cloud, and said slowly, "Are your companions going to be okay?" As he spoke, he raised his head slightly in a daze. The cigarette rod couldn't help but fell down, and the iron cigarette holder hit some yellow teeth. He quickly covered his mouth, and yelled indistinctly, "It hurts." "They'll be fine." Bucky responded lightly, and asked Mochi to get some bandages from the warehouse to wrap them up, and then asked Alex, "What's the matter with those shells?" "You were talking about the unique deep-sea Fungnon group shell on this island. This kind of shell lives in groups in the deep sea. It is said that once it hears the special sound of the current, it will judge the size and danger of nearby creatures and report to the group. Self-defense. Even after death, this biological instinct will not disappear. As long as you imitate the sound of the ocean current, you can control them to attack, defend, or other." During the conversation, a bloody figure in the distance quickly ran over and jumped onto the deck. As soon as he boarded the boat, Bucky asked, "Kabaji, have you seen Shuma?" Kabaji wiped the blood on his body, and said honestly, "I didn't see it, but with his skill, there shouldn't be any problem. But there is no guarantee." Mochi agreed with a serious face. This time the enemy is more difficult than before. Shutaro must have had some accident. What if he can't come back? Mikkel, who was standing on the deck, had a sad face and said in a trembling voice. Bucky glanced at Mikkel from the corner of his eye. After all, women's psychology is more sensitive than men's, and they will always associate some bad things. At this time, there is no need to make her emotionally collapse, and she was about to comfort her. "I heard Mikkel say with a bitter face. Then I won't be able to eat delicious salmon tomorrow." Bucky's face was full of black lines. "What the hell are you thinking, you stupid cat?" Finally, a figure appeared not far away. It was Shuma. Shuma looked like a hyena at this time, sniffing the sand with his nose, quickly digging a hole with his hands. His eyes lit up. He took out the red pepper that was shining in the sun from the bottom of the hole he dug, and threw it into his mouth. Chew with relish. Then he stood up and waved to everyone on the boat. "Bucky, why are you here?" A person. It seems that he didn't catch the jackal. Bucky felt a little unwilling, but at this time it was too late to delay, and after signaling Shuma to come over quickly, he said to Mochi, "Everyone is here, let's lift the anchor." "Bucky, I brought something really fun," Shuma shouted as he ran. "What can you bring, you idiot?" Bucky murmured without paying attention, and turned to look at Kabaji. "Raise the sails too." "B. Captain Bucky." "What's that?" Mochi tugged on Bucky's sleeve, with a shocked expression on his face. "Huh." Bucky looked back in the direction of Shuma, and saw a 6-meter-high shell giant behind the ladder, and behind the shell giant were 40 or 50 black vertical eyes, chasing after him. "Bucky can't calm down anymore. I managed to get rid of so many people. You're lucky. You belong to the vacuum cleaner. You seduce everyone." "Moki, Kabaji, let's sail the boat first. Don't wait for him. Let him come up by himself." Bucky's face was dark. He didn't want to be entangled with this group of black vertical eyes. The pirate flag of Bakudop was inflated by the strong sea wind, and the rudder blades at the stern of the ship slowly sailed out from among several pirate ships and warships as the rudder turned, sailing out of the port. Shuma made moon steps in the air, stepped several times, and finally caught up with the sailing Bakudop, and landed on the deck, somewhat out of breath. And those black vertical eyes, and the shell giants touched the sea surface. There was nothing they could do, and they were forced to stop on the shore. Bucky asked, "You let that jackal get away?" "I was about to catch him, but suddenly a very powerful swordsman blocked me, and then the jackal ingredients disappeared." As he said that, Shu Ma suddenly looked like a child who had done something wrong. His originally bright face turned into a bitter melon look, and he looked down at his toes. He suddenly understood something, raised his head and asked, "Kabaji, that swordsman is not you, is it?" "Shut up." Kabaji jumped off the ship's mast. "Blocked by a swordsman, is it from the one-eyed family? If that person is indeed hostile, why is he just blocking instead of actively attacking?" After thinking about it for a long time, Bucky didn't have a clue in his mind. Looking at Alex, who was leaning on the mast and smoking leisurely, he calmed down and said, "I need the next information. It's been a long time since I've been on a pirate ship." Alex stared at the line between the blue sky and the blue sea in the distance, and praised sincerely, "Freedom and companionship are the most beautiful things that people yearn for." After he finished speaking, he covered his mouth and turned around. It seemed that he had been knocked on his teeth by the cigarette holder again. He took out a pointer from his body slowly and said slowly, "This is the permanent pointer to Santan City." Bucky took it and looked at it for a while. The permanent pointer is a record pointer that stores the magnetic force of an island, and then processed by special means. As long as it is not damaged, the pointer will always point in the direction of that island. Then Bucky handed the permanent pointer to Mikkel, and told the latter to sail in the direction above. Alex went on to say, "This Xe Navison is an affiliated island of Santan City West. but it is the most famous island in this country other than the capital of Gallo, and it can even be regarded as a microcosm of the entire country. You will understand this by then. Alex glanced at the puzzled Buggy, and continued, and the ruler of the One-Eyed family, One-Eyed, is the finance minister under the current king of Santander. Even the well-known Pate Company belongs to him. In addition to the national tax, he himself also donates money from his private treasury to the king every year. Therefore, he is very popular with the king. In recent years, he has hired a large number of craftsmen, build a Wanshu pagoda as a landmark building in the capital. The more Buggy listened, the more he found it incredible. It stands to reason that since this one-eyed man doesn't lack wealth or power, as long as he can enjoy his life with peace of mind, isn't it all right? Why does he still want to recruit pirates and constantly expand his power? This is not the information I can get. Alex slowly shook his head. I only know that its power is deeply rooted, and it is really difficult for pirates like you who are like Crucian carp to deal with him. Ascend to the sky, but with the help of the intelligence network that I have operated and planned here for many years, the odds of winning are not so small. I just want to save my crew. Surrender or resist. Once you choose a path, you can no longer turn back. Besides, I helped you, so you should also help me. Buggy narrowed his eyes slightly to hide the cunning in his eyes. It seems that you really want to draw me to the same front as you. Alex smiled nonchalantly. Payment should be equal to reward. How long will it take to get to Santon City? One day. The sea waves were rippling, and the seagulls flying low opened their long beaks, caught a fresh seafish vacated by the waves, and then flew into the sky. A naval warship was sailing forward on the blue sea, and on the bow deck stood a woman exuding a mature aura from the inside out. She was wearing a navy cloak with a dark red shirt inside, dark purple gloves on her hands, a head of beautiful pink hair draped down her shoulders, a lady's thin cigarette dangling from her sexy red lips, and her eyes were sharp. Looking at the sea ahead, he seemed to be thinking about something. Colonel Tina, who thinks about things, is so beautiful. If I could be stared at by her, I would be willing to let me die now. You good-for-nothing guy, I really want to be trampled on by Colonel Tina. Many sailors behind them shouted frantically with red eyes. Colonel Tina. Finally a reliable sailor came over and calmly took out a document. This is a report on the source of the banned medicinal herb Alpiro silgola in Santa City. Tina took the documents and flipped through them one by one. The sea soldier next to him stood upright, holding his breath and not daring to disturb the officer in front of him. One-eyed, it turned out to be a defeated dog from the previous era. After reading it, Tina reached out and patted the sailor on the shoulder. You did a good job. After searching for so long, you finally have some clues. Tina is happy. The sailor gasped for breath, his pupils kept dilated, he held the shoulder that was patted by Tina in disbelief, and yelled frantically, Colonel Tina patted my shoulder. While talking, she shed tears of happiness and ran shyly towards the cabin, but halfway through, she was stopped by a group of sailors on the deck, who beat and kicked her. You bastard, you were actually touched by Colonel Tina's noble and delicate hand on your shoulder. Ah, it's too hateful, why didn't such a good thing come to me? Go to hell, you pushy guy. Seeing the sailors surrounded in a circle and the sailors in the middle who were beaten up into pig heads but kept a stubborn face, Tina helplessly helped her forehead, not knowing how to persuade her. Under the pointer of the permanent pointer, the Bickadup headed towards Santa City. Mikkel, who had been depressed and worried about Kaya, finally showed a rare smile after eating the salmon made by Huma. In fact, Shuma couldn't tell the difference between a bear and a cat, and the subconscious admiration and respect for Master Shang Ling was somewhat transferred to this kitten, which was the love and partiality that everyone saw in their eyes. Alex does not regard himself as an outsider, he eats a lot. He devours food voraciously, and every time he finishes eating, his face will be covered with rice grains. Moki and Kabaji, who are somewhat dissatisfied with this outsider, secretly ask Shuma borrow the destruction pepper, ground it into powder and sprinkled it in the cigarette holder of Alex's cigarette rod. As a result, Alex squatted in the toilet for several hours, and when he came out, his buttocks were numb and his face was very ugly. Hey, did you bastards make a mistake? Why did you hurt a poor guy? He even growled weakly, and he seemed to be exhausted. Kabaji hurriedly threw the pot away. White-haired bastard, look what a good thing you have done. Mochi responded, TCH, what do you mean, scarf bastard? Don't you admit that you did it? Uncle Mochi would not do such a despicable thing, but I stay with my beloved Li Chi all day long. Then you mean to say, I did this? Humph. The two walked all the way to the deck in a row, closed the cabin door, then smiled knowingly, clapped each other's hands, and said at the same time tacitly, sure enough, it's more annoying to see that familiar guy. Not bad. One day later, the Bikudop finally arrived at Santon City in the direction pointed by the permanent pointer, and slowly landed. According to the map provided by Alex, at a distance of 10 kilometers to the northeast, you can see the largest and most prosperous port in Santander, Lanang. If you want to reach the king's capital, Jalo, the route going straight north through Lanang is the shortest and most convenient. In order to prevent the troubles caused by the appearance of the pirate ship in the port, Buggy asked Kabaji to hand over the other phone bug on his body to Li Kai. According to the old rules, Li Chi guards the ship. If there is an emergency, it can use the phone bug contact, and Mochi will translate the information provided so that corresponding countermeasures can be taken. Li Kai picked his nostrils and put away the phone bug in a humanoid manner. I have to say that this lion's IQ is really not low. With some food and fresh water, Buggy and his party headed towards Lanang Port without further delay. Santon City is a spring island, which is like spring all year round, and the climate is very pleasant. It is not like the biting cold of Winter Island, nor like the scorching barbecue of Summer Island. Under the creation of this environment, the output of crops and aquaculture there is a surplus every year, and the national life is very rich and comfortable. In the case of material surplus, citizens pay more attention to spiritual enjoyment. Therefore, the performing arts industry was born. Various performing arts companies have sprung up like mushrooms after rain. Afterwards, they entered a period of fierce competition. Countless old companies fell, and countless new companies rise. After elimination and merger, Pater Company, which was secretly supported by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has become the leader of all performing arts companies. Famous singers, drama actors, and Miss Universe, the active artists from the company account for 1/2 of the number of artists in the country, and there is even a top artist, Idol King, Lilina, who has won countless wealth and fame. It took half a day to drive more than 30 kilometers. Buggy also thought that Kia was taken captive to the capital of Jalo, and he must have traveled along the route from Navasan to Santon City. Whether to speed up the voyage and chase her back halfway, but did not see any other ships passing by during the sea voyage, which made Buggy lose his mind. Chased after. But since the other party is using Kia to hold her hostage, her situation should be safe. Compared with Erin, who killed herself in the first place, Kia should not suffer too much in the hands of the one-eyed family. When I came to Lanang, it was just after noon, and the sun in Chundao was not fierce, and there was a very warm feeling. On the square in the middle of the port was a super large projection screen for phone bugs, and various delicacies were placed around it. There are barbecues, fried rice, croquettes, and various fruit drinks. Many passers-by sat on the chairs in front of the booth, watching the show among the phone bugs with relish. Let's sit down and eat something first. Buggy looked at the people behind him. There's no need to be dead, don't you even have the confidence to win back your partners? After some encouragement from Buggy, the mentality of the people behind them slowed down, and they sat down in front of a food stall. Alex was also a little surprised at the rapid recovery of the crew. After ordering some delicious food, several people also chewed to fill their stomachs. By the way, they looked up at the performance on the projected image. It was a story of two strangely dressed men upholding justice and eradicating darkness. In this world where there are no end-corner soap operas with bitter hatred and deep hatred and intriguing gongdu dramas, this kind of drama story with simple script and no special effects is very popular. The show ended quickly, because the time was almost past the prime time at noon. Buggy and the others also finished the food on the table, and were about to pay and leave, when suddenly there was a commotion around them. Hey, Mermaid Warrior and Penguin Boy are here. These are the two heroes of Guarding the Lost City Under the Sea, right? Yeah. The latest one I remember is that after defeating the villains, the beautiful princess invited them to eat the legendary cod fillets. A few young children on the road climbed onto the heads of their adults, looked at them from above, and shouted even more excitedly, Penguin Boy, Mermaid Warrior. The originally empty streets suddenly became bustling. Mermaids and penguins. The animal trainer, who was naturally sensitive to animals, stood up. Hero. The one-eyed swordsman with great dreams stood up. The lost city under the sea. The restless idiot chef stood up. Cod fillets. The gluttonous and lazy navigator stupid cat stood up. Buggy, who hadn't figured out the situation yet, was blocked from the sunlight by the figures of the crowd. He was stunned, and stood up to look along the line of sight of the crowd. In the middle of the street are two guys with strange clothes and looks. One is a young boy with a penguin hat on his head, and the other is an older male mermaid who can already walk on 2 feet. They are facing the street side by side. Sidewalked over. These two people. Aren't they the same two people who were performing in the phone bug projection just now? The appearance of these two people is very strange. The penguin boy is a short and fat man, only about 1.5 meters tall. The penguin hat on his head covers the upper half of his face, revealing only a pair of eyes. The mermaid warrior is about 40 to 50 years old, with a red rosacea on his face, a pair of dead fish eyes, and curly hair. He looks and impressions a graceful, sexy and lovely mermaid. The three words don't match at all. Bucky couldn't figure out why these two people had such a huge fan base, but judging from the reactions of the onlookers at the scene, their eyes all showed admiration. The mermaid warrior looked around vigilantly. Penguin, have you found any evil targets nearby? The penguin boy responded seriously. Warrior, the surrounding conditions are good, and no suspicious enemies have been found. This is because the two of them, one in front of the other, stretched out their arms to the left and the right, and shouted tacitly. We are partners of justice, the mermaid warrior and the penguin boy. The mermaid warrior kept moving like a statue, while the penguin boy quickly reached out and pressed the switch of the loudspeaker on his waist, and then resumed the movement of extending his arms. Clang, 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 a very timely voice finally sounded from the loudspeaker. Immediately afterwards, thunderous applause was heard around, spreading to every corner of the street. The corners of Bucky's eyes twitched, and he didn't know where to complain. Why was he able to say such a serious thing? Why does BGM have to be manually manipulated? Also, what kind of medicine did you people with tears in your eyes take wrongly? Penguin boy. Mermaid warrior. Everyone in the square raised their arms and shouted loudly. Don't worry, everyone. The mermaid warrior raised a hand, and the manager behind him immediately took out a table and chairs. If you want the mermaid warrior's kiss and the penguin boy's autograph, please come here. Who would want this kind of thing again? Bucky pouted. The surrounding crowd swarmed up, shouting with joy. Please give penguin boy's autograph. Give me the mermaid kiss. The chubby penguin boy sat on a chair, took blank books and photos, and then returned them to the owner after being kissed by the mermaid warrior. Little by little moved forward, and those who got the autographs left happily, and the people behind continued to make up for it. There were also young and beautiful girls and 7 or 8-year-old young ladies in the team. Let's go. Faced with this situation, Bucky was speechless and didn't intend to get entangled. He was about to leave, but there was no movement from the people behind him. Kabaji stood there with scorching eyes. This is the hero that everyone is looking forward to. The mermaid looks so ugly, is it an animal or a plant? Mochi rubbed his chin and thought. Shutaro is missing. Mikkel shook his head left and right to search, and suddenly pointed in a direction, there. Looking back, I saw that Shu Ma had happily mixed into the long queue of the team, standing on tiptoe from time to time to look at the team in front, showing a very bright smile. Bucky helplessly supported his forehead, sat back on the chair, and looked at Alex who was smoking a cigarette, which was commonplace and indifferent. They also belonged to the performing arts company. Alex changed one foot and put it on the chair, put the hand holding the cigarette rod on his knee, took a puff from the cigarette holder, and slowly exhaled the smoke ring. It is the most prestigious company under the Pater Company. Performer. Bucky asked. I remember you said that Pate's company was secretly supported by One Eye, so all these artists belong to the One Eye family? No, not necessarily. In fact, only a few people know that the boss behind Pater's company is Cyclops. Most ordinary people join Pater's company to realize their star dreams. My own hands are also normal. What about these two? I am not sure. While the two were whispering, a sexy figure walked past the table. Bucky looked up subconsciously. This man had pink hair, a thin cigarette in his mouth, a face with delicate facial features, wearing a black shirt and black tights, with his hands in his pockets, exuding she has a very mature look of Yuji, followed by 3 followers wearing ordinary peaked caps. The 4 of them sat down on chairs at another table and talked quietly. Colonel Tina, what do you need to eat? I'll bring it to you. Just call Tina temporarily, don't reveal our identities. Yes, Tina. After saying this, the servant wearing the peaked cap passed out happily. You boy. How dare you call Colonel Tina's name directly? The other person opened his eyes wide and angrily, and slapped the table angrily, making a slapping sound. Looking at the movement over there, Bucky felt puzzled. He had never seen that pink-haired woman before, but he always felt very familiar. It wasn't until one of them called out, Colonel Tina, that Bucky realized it. Tina, the captain of the Navy headquarters, a person with the ability to check the fruit, and Smoker are the same students under ZFA's door. Why did she appear here? Bucky lowered his eyes, half covered his face, stood up, and whispered to Mochi, go and call Shuma back, we are going to leave. With Kia's whereabouts unknown, he doesn't want to get into trouble with the Navy now. Although the idea is good, the reality is always crueler than the ideal. Shuma held up a paper Bailey, waved it and shouted excitedly, Bucky, I got the mermaid warrior. A kiss. Bucky's face froze, and he slowly turned his head to look at Tina's table, and the other party's gaze met his own at the same time. Run. As he said that, Bucky rushed out bravely. Although the companions behind him didn't know why, They saw Bucky running out in a panic, and they also chased after him. Bucky. Bucky the clown. Tina reacted, stood up abruptly, stepped out of the moon step in an instant, rushed to the sky, and then raised her foot in the air. Several black javelins came out of her legs, and stabbed towards Bucky. Bucky's footsteps were staggered, and he dodged sideways in an instant. Several javelins cut through the unoccupied food stalls and blasted the entire food cart to pieces. The tip of the black javelin plunged into the ground. The slate floor was suddenly crushed. This is armed domineering?